I'll send them to you. Oh, great.
You can write that. You can visit it up, Sean.
Hey, good evening and welcome to the Littleton Board of Selectmen meeting for Monday, January 14th, 2019. I will read through the agenda and then we will get underway. We've got a full meeting tonight and we've been very busy of late and that doesn't look like it's going to let up for a while. So anyway, we will be at 6:30 doing the organization of the board, Pledge of Allegiance, read mail. Sanctuary Medicinals should be in tonight, Anthony, correct, for the check
He's
presentation?
been notified.
Okay. Do we get the check yet?
We got the checks.
Okay, well, all right.
That's the most important thing.
Thank you. 6:35, department updates, Police Department, we have an appointment of a part-time dispatcher. Department of Elder and Human Services, we also have gift acceptances from 2 different donors. Finance Department, fiscal year 20 capital and operational budget update. 6:55, public input, members' updates. 7 p.m., joint meeting with Park and Rec Commission regarding a vacancy. We have a board appointment to make. 7:05, Town Administrator Search Committee update. 7:15, public hearing on the Foster Street TIP project with 2 alternate concept plans to be presented. At 7:25, we will be making our appointment to the Metropolitan Area Planning Council. 7:30, we have a joint meeting with the Historical Commission to discuss the Baker House. At 7:45, discussion with legal counsel on adult use marijuana retail process and legal possibilities. 8:15, report from the interim town administrator regarding space needs, OPM services, and the Long Lake Bathhouse septic issue, followed by 8:30 minutes and adjournment, if we're lucky. So, with that, Madam Clerk, would you read us in the pledge?
Certainly. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, also, Selectman DeCoste will not be joining us tonight, not feeling that great, although he did have some input on a few items that I will offer when we get to those points. With that, Anthony, would you like to lead us through the mail?
Certainly, Mr. Chairman. The first thing is it's an email I got from Selectman Napoli, who's on the Affordable Housing Trust Fund. She just wanted to let the board be aware that they're hosting having a housing summit on Tuesday, March 12th at 7 o'clock. Location is still to be determined, so you'll hear more information about that. This is a save the date. All right, Cindy, did you have, is that good?
We just thought the Affordable Housing Trust Fund Board of Trustees, it would be a great idea to bring all the boards in and give them a short presentation on the information that we've obtained and where we're at, and some short-term goals and some long-term goals. So just a good way to get everybody on the same page.
The next thing, the Friends of the Council on Aging is having their monthly lunch. It's, you guessed it, Mexican night, so a Mexican dinner. It's Wednesday, the 16th, this Wednesday at noon. The deadline has passed, but just letting the board know if you're in the area to stop by. And the last thing is good news from the Executive Office of Energy and Environmental Affairs. Our Littleton's open space and recreation plan has been approved. What that means is now we'll be able to go for DCS grant funds through the year 2023, which is great. I know that's been in the works for the past couple of years anyways, Keith, huh? So.
Yes, I was so glad to see that letter too, because Cynthia Wall, who worked on the report, retires this last Friday. So I'm glad she got that done.
Okay, good.
That's it.
That's it, okay. And as I stated earlier, we have scheduled a check presentation ceremony. Our friends from Sanctuary Medicinals, but unless there's somebody here from Sanctuary, no. Well, we'll work them in if they do arrive later, but in any event, we did receive a payment in the amount of how much?
$25,000.
$25,000.
Out of the host community agreement.
House community agreement. Is that our first year, or is that the second year?
It's the second one.
It's the second check in the first year,
Right.
Okay,
because it's a total of 50.
$1,000.
They put 220 bucks.
okay, good. All right. So that's working out. All right, moving on to department updates. Chief Pinar, would you like to join us?
Yes, I do.
Good evening.
Good evening.
As you're aware, because of the emergency medical dispatch, we have 2 dispatchers on. We've been trying to backfill our pool with some part-time dispatchers, per diems. Tonight I bring before you a very qualified candidate for the position, Jonathan Wales, not only a resident of town, but he's also been on the Littleton Volunteer Corps for the last 2 years. Went through an interview process and he came out on top, and I bring him before the board today.
Okay, terrific. Thank you, Chief, and thank you, Jonathan. We do have your resume and cover letter here, but it's usually our practice for you to take this opportunity to introduce yourself to the town, so if you wouldn't mind telling us and through us, the folks of Littleton, who you are and why you're interested.
Sure. As the chief said, I've been in town for about 4 years. I still work in Boston, so I'm looking to not make that commute on a daily basis eventually. But I love the feel of Littleton. It reminds me of where I grew up in Iowa, kind of rustic, but still developing. So just being able to meet people and helping people is something that I have always enjoyed. I'm in the hospitality industry now, so interaction with people is something I feel I'm good at. And I just want to transition into a professional role in that capacity.
Okay. Board members, we'll go around and see if anyone has any questions. Selectman Knox?
Just your current occupation, but what is Cheers Hampshire House Corporation?
Do you know the Cheers TV show from the 80s? So the restaurant in Boston, I actually work for the parent company. So dealing with tourists and that, it's fun, but yes.
But it's Boston.
Yes, it's Boston, a long way from Littleton, yeah.
We had a candidate the chief brought before us before that said bouncer right on his resume. You were a bouncer here? Or?
I was a doorman, that's how I actually got into the field, doing security, and then they hired me as a doorman, more of a bar back, if you will.
Okay.
But I grew that position to a manager role and then to an administrative role. So I've been with that company for 12 years now, and they're a great company to work for. It's just the commute is one of the big things, but I like them and I like Littleton, so.
Sure. Okay. Selectman Gerbig?
Put the hard question right to you. You aspire to a full-time position doing this?
Absolutely. Yeah, that would be my ultimate goal.
That's really all I need to know.
Okay.
Excellent.
One
I
thing
can-
I'd
I
like to
can
say
read-
is,
Napoli?
No, go ahead, Chief.
before you start, is that Jonathan's coming to us very, very green. We're gonna look to train him up from the ground up, and hopefully eventually it'll prosper into a full-time position like you were asking, but we're gonna try this out. He came to us very inspired, so I think that'll be a good fit for us.
Excellent. I was just going to say I can relate about the commute. I did that for years, and it is much better working close to home. So just want to say welcome aboard.
Thank you.
You'll get to hear about all the accents firsthand right on the radio.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
So, all right, well, if there aren't any other questions, I don't have any. I'm just delighted that, that you're looking to join the town in public safety, especially as a resident. That's terrific. So, if there aren't any other further questions or comments, I guess we do have a motion, is that right? Yeah.
We do. Yep. Move that the Board of Selectmen vote to appoint Jonathan R. Wales of Littleton as a part-time reserve communications officer for the Littleton Police Department.
Second.
Okay, the motion's been made by Selectman Napoli, seconded by Selectman Knox. Any further discussion? All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Nay, the ayes have it. Congratulations, welcome aboard.
Thank you. Thank you.
Great. Congratulations. You're welcome.
Thank you.
Is that it, chief?
That's it for me. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm off to Groton for a hockey game. They're playing Littleton tonight, so.
Elder and Human Services, we have a couple of items. Who's leading the charge on that? I see some folks from...
Me.
You are,
I'll take
okay.
He's got the scoop.
He's got the scoop, all right.
So we have 2 donations in front of you for the board to select. The first one is from the Morrison Charitable Gift Foundation in the amount of $2,500. the money will be split into $1,250 will go into the special gift fund for transportation programs, and $1,250 will be deposited into the fund established by town meeting to aid the elderly and disabled taxation fund.
Okay.
So we'll take them up separately, and we have separate motions.
Do we have separate motions?
We do.
Okay, it looked like one joint one here, but if you, you get on, all right. Board members, any further comment? Council on Aging members, you're gonna be happy to take the money? Oh, definitely. All right, so with that, a motion?
Is it one motion, or
It's one motion for each gift, so this is the first
just
one.
as it's written?
Yeah.
Okay. Move that the Board of Selectmen vote pursuant to Mass General Laws, Chapter 44, Section 53A, as recommended by the Council on Aging, to receive an unsolicited gift of $2,500 from the John and Eunice Morrison Charitable Foundation, of which $1,250 shall be deposited into the special gift fund for the transportation program of the Department of Elder and Human Services, and $1,250 shall be deposited in the fund established by town meeting's acceptance of Mass General Laws, Chapter 60, Section 3D, to aid the elderly and disabled taxation fund for the purpose of defraying the real estate taxes of elderly and disabled persons of low income.
Second.
Okay, the motion's been made by Selectman Napoli, seconded by Selectman Knox. Any further discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. All opposed? The ayes have it.
The next
Second motion?
The next one is $7,500 for the Henry Vincent Cooper Charitable Fund. Those funds get deposited into the energy assistance under the direction of the Department of Elder and Human Services for needy Littleton residents.
Okay. And you have the motion here?
Sure.
Yep.
Move that the Board of Selectmen vote pursuant to Mass General Laws, Chapter 44, Section 53A, to receive and deposit a gift from the Henry Vincent Cooper Charitable Foundation in the amount of $7,500 for the special gift fund for energy assistance under the direction of the Department of Elder and Human Services for needy Littleton residents.
Second.
Okay, the motion has been made by Selectman Napoli, seconded by Selectman Knox. Any further discussion? All those in favor, say aye. Aye. All opposed? The ayes have it. Thank you. I assume thank you letters have gone out to the trusts or from somebody?
Marge, you normally send those out, right?
Sue's nodding yes back there. Yeah,
Yeah.
okay. Great. Terrific. Okay. Finance Department. Last saw you on the all-day session Saturday morning. Money, yeah. Well, too.
It did.
All right. Is there any intro here, Anthony, or is Bonnie
No,
making the
Bonnie
presentation?
will go through it.
Okay, terrific.
This is going to be kind of a high-level update. I'm working on a more detailed update as we're scheduled for a joint meeting with the Finance Committee next Tuesday night. And at that point, I'll have capital. I apologize, I couldn't get the capital plan together for you because PMBC was still working out their final numbers. I've since received them on Friday, so I'll be able to have a robust update for you on Tuesday on that end. But as far as the budget goes, I was able to go through all of the materials that was presented to you on Saturday. And I have two different scenarios that I'm looking at tonight. Usually at this point in the budget process, I try to start working out a balancing scenario that will bring us together. At the level staffing scenario, at this point, I have a $272,000 deficit, which is not unheard of at this juncture in time. And I would qualify that level staffing is based on the level staffing budgets on all of the town departments. So no additional hours, no increases in FTEs or anything like that, no new programs. On the school side, it does cover the contractually obligated salary increases of $557,000 plus an additional $467,000 for a total increase of just shy of $1 million. And compared to this year, it was about $700,000 for fiscal 19. So it's an increase over 19, and it's an increase over the minimum staffing request. It is
And
shy.
the basis for that is level, the argument is level service as opposed to level staffing?
Correct. We're not quite sure where we are with level service yet. We haven't received the school's spreadsheet update that shows the use of all of their other funds, the school choice, the circuit breaker funds, all of the revolving funds and the grants. So we can't really we're not really at the point of seeing where the level service budget is. There are also some requests to increase the amount of tuition-free pre-K kindergarten. So we need to work through those numbers, but in this, to just start off the scenario, it's about the same increase on the town size as it would be on the school, so it's about 5.18% increase. So to be fair, that's kind of where I'm starting. If you go to the mission budget, we've got a deficit of almost $1.4 million, so 1.379 million. So this takes into consideration all of the staffing requests that have been made and the school budget at the full $1.4 million increase that they had requested. It includes adjustments in fringe for any staffing increases. It includes an increase in the roadway budget that was referenced, as a wish list item. But primarily, it's the staffing increases and the full school appropriation that had been requested. So I think, that's going to be, an unattainable goal at this point. But it's good to just put a number on it and see where you're at. And based on our current projections, the town has about almost $2 million in available recurring revenue from fiscal 19 to 20, or about 4.6% increase. So that's a good increase. That includes the levy, any new growth, and some local receipt adjustments. So going from here forward, the things that are in play, we don't have a governor's budget yet. That should be coming out in the next week. Usually we get that when we go to MMA. So I have level funded state aid based on that. State aid has been flat the past 5 years, so I'm not expecting any grand increases in that area.
State hasn't had $1 billion surplus in past years either.
And even when they've had good surpluses, our state aid has been flat. It's just the way that it's been going. I will wait for the first commitment on excise, which typically comes out in February, before I can adjust that beyond what I have projected for this year. Excise has been a good, run for us the last few years. It's been increasing with both the number of residents that we've had in town, increasing, bringing in vehicles, and the turnover to newer vehicles. So hopefully that trend continues, but, we like to monitor that because that can tank quickly if people start retaining their vehicles for some reason. The staffing increases on page 2, I did want to call out and identify for you just so that it's kind of easy to look at it. The first one is in the town clerk's area. So you might remember from the Super Saturday presentation, we have a 15-hour-a-week clerk scheduled in that office. At this point, we're looking to go to a 30-hour-a-week assistant town clerk, which is a higher level of service. The impact, that delta, is $24,000 in salary and about $3,600 in fringe because the positions are already a benefit-eligible position. So we're not adding another set of health insurance benefits or anything like that. It's just the Medicare and everything. That one, I just wanted to highlight. I would hope to talk about that one a little bit earlier than waiting until town meeting, only because the position is vacant now, and I'm reluctant to fill it at an admin capacity if the goal is to go to an assistant town clerk capacity, because it wouldn't make sense to fill it and then change it in 6 months. So I'd hope to have some agenda time maybe to talk about that impact to the board. In the treasurer's office, there was a request for adding 5 hours a week to our HR administration. So the cost to that is about $7,600 and about $1,100 in fringe. The planning board is looking to add 5 hours to the planner's position to be funded by the general fund appropriation. Currently, Marin's hours are 35 hours funded by the appropriation and 5 hours through the master plan article. She's just looking to get the full 40 funded in the operating budget. Again, no fringe as far as health insurance, it's just the minimal fringe that would be counted. In highway, Chris is looking to add 1 parks laborer at the amount of just shy of $47,000. Fringe on that would be $21,000 estimated. Cemetery is looking for seasonal labor hours, so $10,000, again, non-benefit eligible, so the fringe is minimal at $1,500. The police is looking for a school resource officer at a cost of $47,548 with the fringe at $21,872. And the library is just looking for some additional hours for existing staff, so the fringe would be minimal on that. The hours impact is just shy of $16,000, $15,845, and the fringe would be $23,776. One thing that is
What,
in...
I'm sorry, Bonnie, could you say those numbers again?
The additional hours for the library staff is 15,845,
Okay.
and the fringe would be 2376, because it's existing staff. So one of the things that is in the level staffing budget that was not in last year, and I put it in here based on the conversations that the board has had about trying to find some relief for the elderly and disabled on taxes. We did put a $25,000 appropriation into the TRED account. Again, I mentioned on Saturday that last year we had $6,000 that we were able to distribute in aid. And that's not a tremendous amount of money, so we divided among the eligible applicants, and it is what it is. By putting $25,000 into it, you're able to better target the group that needs it, that needs this relief. People who use this could still work in the senior work program, they could still work in the veterans work program. It's just another source of aid to help them on their taxes. We're also looking to do more outreach with the Elder and Human Services Department to get more people to come in and apply if they're, finding themselves in need of this type of relief. But this is in this level staffing budget, so I did that. I can take it out if it's not.
Is it a set sum, Bonnie, that's divided amongst a set group of applicants?
Yeah.
So if we enlarge the pool, the available funds, and then vet more applicants, it would just be divided evenly among them? Yeah. Was there anyone, there was no one that was turned away last year?
No, the people that qualified.
Okay, it was,
Yes.
okay, perfect, thanks.
And how many I have to do this probably 3 times now, I just
I
can't
think
remember.
it was like, I want to say 12 or.
Yeah,
It
that's a
wasn't
very-
a
I had a
lot.
dozen
No,
in my head,
yeah.
but, okay, yep.
It was 11 or 12. But, so we want to do some more outreach. We know that, people are feeling it.
Right.
And
Was the $6,000 that was there last year from an appropriation? Oh, received by donations, okay, so what we're talking about is a $25,000 appropriation and still the potential to increase that based on income and donations. Okay.
And I think in your previous.
Oh, and you say 12
added
up.
some money into the TRED account from the
Right.
donations too, so.
Right.
That will go into it. And there was a committee that, with the help of Elder and Human Services, they screen the applicants, they make sure that they qualify, and then they distribute the aid.
Okay.
Great.
And again, as I mentioned, we don't have the worksheet with the school reserves and their use of their revolving funds yet. I'm hoping to have that for next Tuesday's meeting. So I reached out to Steve Mark to ask him if he'd have that updated. I'm not sure if they will, but I know that they're working on it.
Okay. Just one question. On page 2, the town clerk, treasurer, and planning positions, are those the positions that went before the personnel board?
So
Or those are
the way that the policy works for vacancies is when Linda retires, we have a vacancy and a hiring policy. So anytime the position becomes vacant, we look at it and say, okay, what do we need to do? We could replace with what we had, but there was the sense that that wasn't going to be adequate, but that's always still an option. So you can still replace at the 15-hour-a-week clerk and go with that. Diane indicated she needs help, and she needs not admin help, but higher help, somebody that can actually stand in place of the town clerk when she's absent, certify things, use the town seal as needed, accept formal documents from the zoning board of appeals, for example, that have to be received by the town clerk and nobody else. So the assistant admin position that was there before could not do those types of duties. Additionally, getting things out on the website quicker has been a big desire. So she said, I really would like to have 30 hours a week of an assistant town clerk position. And Debbie, who serves in the tax collector's office, said, I'm good. I don't need a higher level of service. It's fine with just a clerical position. But Diane needs more hours and a higher rate. So we didn't have a job description for that. So what we do is, under the policy, it says, okay, if you've got a vacancy and you don't have a job description for what you're looking for, you have to stop. Go create the job descriptions, get them graded by personnel, and then go back. If it's an increase in hours, which this is, you have to go back to the Board of Selectmen for an approval. So we've done the legwork, we figured out, what the fiscal impact is, we've drafted job descriptions based on the input from the department heads and the personnel board, and they voted them. Doesn't mean you have to fill it, it just means you have to go through that process before you come back to the selectmen. So we did that, and we're ready to come forward when you guys are ready to hear us.
Okay, all right, great. Perfect. All right, good.
The only point I made before was that when this first starts, I just wish the board would know that you're doing it first, knowing that you have to bring it back before us. So we don't hear from somebody else, oh, yeah, well, they're trying to increase it.
Yeah, and that's a communication issue, and we can deal with that, without having to, change the policy or anything like that.
Right.
We'll just make sure that we're notifying the board formally.
Yeah, my comments are actually similarly related on the communications level. This was the latest time in the year so far that we've had the all-day Super Saturday, and yet it doesn't matter whether we have it in October, November, December, or January, we still don't get the book for the backup materials until 2 days or 3 days before the meeting, and I was traveling, so it was pretty useless to get them electronically when I was out of town until 11 the night before. I think that's a solvable problem, and I wish we'd do that. In a similar frame, somewhere has been lost that the reports that to departments that come here, we should be not seeing those those requests at the first time at the budget hearing. I'm not necessarily blaming you for that, but we've got to make sure that, for instance, just here on the list of the additional personnel help there, the police and highway, or for that matter, the highway plans to expand the garage, or discussions relative to the library finance plan. Those are all things I think we want to have a role in. So I'm happy also that you reminded us that next Tuesday we have a joint meeting with the Finance Committee, and we're going to get into all that stuff there and other issues. And a couple of those items I just mentioned, actually Chuck had a similar interest in, so I'm conveying that for myself and him. Any other points? So unless the gruesome storm that might ruin all of next week happens, as it might, then we'll see you on Tuesday night?
Yes.
Yeah,
Will we?
it is Tuesday, right?
It is
It's a
Tuesday.
FinCom meeting night, right?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. Betsy, anything to add, since you're the designated FinCom member here tonight? Who else is here? Oh, Gary's back there. Hi, Gary. All right, okay.
Thank you.
That it? Thank you.
Do you want to do the park and rec
Yeah,
and stuff?
yeah, sure. Speaking of Gary's, another Gary back there, Gary Ossie, come on up. I don't know how to tell you this, but none of your colleagues in the Park and Rec are going to show up tonight, is what we told. Nonetheless, they all support you to be appointed to this position.
The more I try to get away, the more I come.
Yeah, yeah. Is this your third go-around on this?
It is,
It
yes.
is, yeah, okay.
This is a short-term one.
Short term, all right. Well, we still don't have a problem in the spring, don't we?
What's that?
For the permit, you gonna run again in the
I
spring?
am not.
You're not,
This is just
okay,
to fill
okay.
the remainder of
Okay.
Mr. Crory's term.
All right, well, then again, to remind folks, there is a vacancy by resignation on the Park and Rec Commission. The Park and Rec Commissioners and the Selectmen have been in contact on this, and they were noticed on this meeting. In fact, Mike Prue from the Park and Rec Commission encouraged us to go ahead and appoint Gary, and indicated that he didn't think any of his other members would be here, which raised a bit of a potential quorum issue, because as you can see, there's only 4 of us here, but the potential pool of voters would have been as high as 9, but I guess by past precedent, we've determined, and we're lucky to have our administrator emeritus with us here tonight, Keith. We can ask, we don't even have to incur legal funds when we ask Keith a question. He's here free of charge. But
Good for it. You've given the notice to the remaining members
Right.
of the other board, and it's.
we just need
majority
a majority of those present, correct? Yeah, okay.
We do have 2 of the commissioners.
Oh, all right, well, good, then we will do this formally with you guys present, and you guys are, you're posted for this meeting as well, so now we do have a pool of 6, that's terrific, good. Then,
Good work.
yeah, I'm sorry I didn't recognize you earlier, but Prue said none of you are gonna be here, so I'm sorry. All right. Okay. Gary, do you want to start off by reintroducing yourself to the town, or?
Yeah, Gary Austin, 162 Wickham Ave. I've been a former Park and Rec Commissioner for 12 years. This would round out, I think, the 13th year and 12th year. And I knew they were looking for a fill, and they asked me to do it, and I was more than happy to bail them out for the short term.
And members, you're out looking for a recruit for the spring, are you?
Absolutely.
Good, good. All right, does anybody from either the Board of Selectmen or the Park and Rec have a Question or a comment to make relative to Gary's offering to come forward?
Just a quick administrative question. The seat that Gary's filling, that didn't happen to be up in May anyway, did it? So we're gonna have two seats up in May now?
I don't recall where
That
it
one
landed.
is up in May.
Oh, it is?
It was?
Your seat
The
is
one
up?
I'm- Yeah.
Oh, okay.
yeah.
So it'll
And I
just be
think there's
one
somebody
seat.
else's is up too. There's
Oh, it
two.
will be two, okay.
Mike Lavasteur's up in May as well, so we'll have 2 seats, and I'm not sure if he's decided if he's gonna run again or not.
Okay.
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 Fair enough. All right, then I guess procedurally, what we would like is to get a
Jason, I don't
a
have.
motion, and maybe it's probably most appropriate to get it from your future colleagues from the Park and Rec, then just identify yourselves as you make the motion in a second, and then we'll do a roll call vote.
Sure, Kevin Matrano, 78 Tehadawon Road, and we are motioning that Gary.
You can follow it right up on
Oh,
the...
sorry. That the board, selectmen, and the remaining members of the Park and Rec Commission vote pursuant to MGL 4111 to appoint Gary Austin to fill the vacancy on the Park and Rec Commission through May 2019 annual town election.
Okay, and there was a second from who?
Sean Sullivan, 155 Hartwell Ave, I second the motion.
Okay, great. So we've had a motion from Commissioner Matrano and a second from Commissioner Sullivan. Any further questions from either Selectmen or Park and Rec Commissioners? If not, all those in favor of Gary Austin signify by saying aye.
We've actually got a roll call vote.
All right, you're right. Thank you. And I knew that, too. All right, roll call. I'll go around. Commissioner Matrano.
Yes.
Commissioner Sullivan.
Yes.
Selectman Napoli.
Yes.
Selectman Gerbig.
Yes.
Selectman Knox.
Yes.
Selectman Glavy, yes. Unanimous. Congratulations. Welcome back.
I guess.
Thanks, Gary.
Yes, thanks.
Okay. Doubling back there, we did have at 6:55, public input members' updates. For the public, I see we have more bodies than we usually have here. If you're looking to address a topic that's on an agended item, you'll get your chance to speak at that point. But if you want to talk about something that's not on our agenda, you'll have an opportunity to do that right now, if anyone's interested. And if not, I'll move directly to member updates, and I'll start with Selectman Napoli.
Sure. So the Veterans Heritage Grant was received, I received notification today. They said that they would have a decision by the end of the month for us. So I did receive that confirmation. If anyone isn't familiar, we applied for a $15,000 matching grant for the Veterans Corner update. So they did receive our package, and hopefully we're expected to hear by the end of the month.
Terrific. All right, anything else? Okay. Chase?
Just to let you guys know what's going on with the Morrison property, we had received some comments on that about the ability to address some invasive species there. I met with Amy Green, our Conservation Commissioner, a rep of the Littleton Conservation Trust, and one of our Conservation Commissioner, or I'm sorry, Amy's the Conservation Coordinator, and one of our Conservation Commissioners, Sarah Seward, this morning. And they're going to put together the package of information. Anthony, I think they're going to request to get on our agenda on the 28th.
Type meeting?
If possible. I told them very much, it's subject to what else we could get on there, but they're going to put together a packet of information that includes past correspondence. It includes, actually, one of the best arguments that they have for doing this, which is a photo of the property in 2003 juxtaposed with what it looks like today.
Okay.
Anyway, so you'll hear from them, Anthony, and I think we'll get the full package
Excellent.
of information by the 28th or whenever we can ultimately get them on.
Okay.
All right, anything else?
Oh, actually, you know what? I lied. The other thing that the board should be aware of and expecting is the sewer process is moving along apace, and what we've got at this point is essentially a draft memo for the structure for opting in and opting out, and as well as a draft of the paper evaluation of other sites for the quirk. And so we're working on, as far as the sewer committee is concerned, on tightening those up. addressing the details so that we can bring that to the Board of
We're
Selectmen to
looking at
look
the
at.
28th as
That's the
well for that.
28th, yeah.
That will be the 28th, and that's where it gets really, this is where the rubber really hits the road. The other thing that we've done is started to engage town council, because we will need an act of the legislature to establish our sewer district, so expect to also see some of that start to come forward. And we will probably need an article at town meeting to go along with that act of the legislature to establish the sewering district. So all of that's moving. We've got a substantial amount of draft documents that you guys are going to need to take a look at.
We have some meetings this week with some big potential
With some of the entities that generate larger flow, but that doesn't mean that if anybody's watching, don't feel like I only generate a small amount of flow. I don't get a say in this process. We're trying to reach out to as many potential participants as possible and make this work for as
Some are
many
complicated.
participants. Yeah, the bigger ones are definitely the more complicated ones, for sure.
Okay, great. Selectman Knox?
All set.
Okay, and I don't have any particular items either that aren't already addressed in our full agenda. Next topic item, the Town Administrative Search Committee update. I can understand from looking at the crowd that there are people here that are specifically interested in that subject, but I'll start by saying this, that we'll review the process where we're at. It's in the Selectmen's hands now, although by statute, we've been doing what, well, not by statute, by the town bylaw, we've been doing what the bylaw has told us to do since when we got word of Keith's retirement and the need to fill that vacancy. We appointed the Town Administrator Selection Committee per the bylaw requirements back in September, I believe. Been getting regular updates through that time period, and they the task, as we call them, and the Selectmen met last Wednesday in this room where they presented us with the 3 finalists that they had come up with through that process. And the board at that time also adopted a schedule, which we had talked about publicly before, at least pieces of it, about how we would go forward. And we have actually already done part of that on Saturday morning. We had an interesting session where each selectman had a chance to meet individually with each of the candidate finalists briefly. Tomorrow night, we're due to have interviews starting at 5:30. I believe we have 75 minutes allotted for each of the 3 interview sessions. One of the tasks we have tonight is to settle on some of the questions that we might be asking generally, and aware that everybody who has access to the internet could hear about those questions, where the proposal's been made that we actually do that discussion at the end of the meeting, where we can ask our friends at Littleton Community Television to turn the cable off so that we can discuss that without giving too much advance notice to our candidates.
It will still be an open meeting.
Open meeting,
By all
yeah,
means.
yeah. If you want to hang around here in the room, you can, you'll be just as informed as anyone else, but we're trying to make it not too easy for the finalists to get those questions in advance. I will entertain questions, but one thing we cannot discuss, and this is by our obligations under the law, is that we can't be discussing any of the candidates. The finalist names are known, and we're going to be interviewing them tomorrow publicly. But for any questions regarding the process earlier than that, Chase is here, who is the chair of the task committee. Board members, of course, are here too. We can answer your questions on procedure, but I will not allow, it'll be out of order, any discussion of individual people who may have applied for the position, and they're protected under law, that we're not allowed to divulge who those candidates might have been or what took place in their candidacy and their interviews, if they did have them. So, did I miss anything of that, Chase, in terms of that you think is important we should bring out?
No, one thing I do want to add, and that's that our process started out with essentially a needs evaluation, looking at input from members of the public to the extent that they wanted to give us input from the Board of Selectmen, from department heads, from other town administrators and town managers to really understand what it is our community needs before we then went out and looked for and found candidates. So, so that whole process, we spent a month to a month and a half doing that process before we even issued a job description, because the job description, or the job posting, was tailored to some of those needs. So, other than that, no, I think you described the process.
Okay, and to reiterate, it's in this week's packet, it's been in, or similar updates of various forms have been in Selectmen's packets, and we've had updates at the meetings numerous times over the past several months. But before I ask if there's any public input, let me see if the board members have anything to add. Joe, Cindy? No. Okay, and the suggestion again to take up the topic of addressing the questions, doing that at the end of the meeting, you okay with that? Just so that we can ask the
that
cable
makes
folks?
sense, yeah.
Okay, and Chuck had some input for that as well. So that being said, I know there's public interest out there, and I am now going to take your input. Nancy?
Nancy Levine, Grist Mill Road. When the meeting started, you went through the mail. I didn't hear anything about the mail that was sent, my letter included, plus others about the current position.
Okay, good point. When we get emails forwarded to us during the week as they come in, we don't always get those in the packet. That's not usually one of the items that we cover, but I think we got about 6 or 8 letters on that topic in the past week. Then they've all been forwarded to us, but since we get them directly by email, they're not. The mail packet is kind of a holdover from the bygone era. This is the stuff that actually comes by postal delivery that ends up in the mail packet. But we did indeed get your email.
Decisions will be made very soon before you get to the mail. And
No, we've already gone through the mail. That's all. We've all received all those emails.
Paul,
You have.
we have a public hearing,
What time's the public hearing?
7:15.
7:15.
Do you want to open that first?
Yeah, Anthony just reminds me, we have a public hearing, which is, we're obligated to open on time. I'll get right back to you. I think we're going to have to open the public hearing, get back to this topic. So if the board is okay with that, apologize that we are posted for a 7:15 public hearing, and we have to do that. So the hearing notice is right here, and I will read the notice. Littleton Board of Selectmen, public hearing, alternative concepts for Foster Street from Taylor Street to Howard Avenue, Transportation Improvement Program TIP project. Littleton Board of Selectmen will conduct a public hearing on Monday, January 14, 2019, at 7:15 p.m. in the Littleton Town Offices, Room 103, 37 Shattuck Street, Littleton, Mass., on these 2 alternative concept plans for Foster Street from Taylor Street to Balsam Lane, TIP project, concept 1, 2 11-foot wide travel lanes, 2 5-foot wide dedicated bike lanes, and a 5-foot wide sidewalk on the north side of Foster Street, and concept 2, 2 10-foot wide travel lanes, 2 5-foot wide shoulders, 2.5 foot wide grass strip, and a 10-foot wide separated shared use path located on the north side of Foster Street. Copies of the 2 alternative concept plans are available online at www.littletonmass.org and in the Selectmen Town Administrator's Office, Littleton Town Offices, Room 306, 37 Shattuck Street, Littleton, Mass. 01460. Comments may be submitted to that office by Wednesday, January 9th, 2019, at noon or in person at the hearing. Littleton Board of Selectmen, Paul Glavy, Chairman. I declare the hearing open. And I imagine, Chris, you're going to be the person to walk us through it?
Yeah, I have Fussell O'Neill.
Okay, yeah, so if you'd like to come on up and introduce your team. Again, it's Chris Stoddard, our Highway Superintendent, Director of Public Works.
Just signatures.
Okay.
Take control.
Yeah, sure.
Acceptances. Thank you, Chris.
So while I do this, I'm going to have Fuss O'Neill introduce themselves, but Fuss O'Neill is our consulting engineer on this project.
Yeah, sure. My name is Nick LaPointe. Like Chris said, I'm with Fuss O'Neill. Along with me is Rachel Kohler-Parr. She's one of our project engineers. Our office is located in Springfield, Massachusetts. For those of you who aren't familiar, we're a multidiscipline engineering firm, about 350 employees, ranging from environmental, transportation, structures, We also have architecture as well. And we have been hired by the town to look at improvements to the Foster Street corridor. This project is going to be administered by Mass DOT under the Transportation Improvement Program. Funding is coming in part from the state, usually at 20%, and from the federal highway at 80%. Those are the numbers that typically, depending on the funding sources, there could be other federal matches as well. And so where we are right now, and I know we're short on time here.
No, take the time you need.
I'll walk you through where we're at in the design process. And this is kind of unique that we don't see too often. Whereas the goals of this project is what we're really trying to accomplish. There are multiple alternatives that fit that need. Oftentimes when these MassDOT projects are presented to us, there's kind of an obvious solution. And in this case, there was two obvious solutions, and it gives a good opportunity to allow the board and the town to kind of give their input and some of their feedback, and what is best suited for the town and kind of what the town prefers. And so that's why we're here today. We're looking for an endorsement. We want to move the project forward in the 25% design path, which is the major milestone for Mass DOT. And so to go to Mass DOT with an endorsed alternative will really help our case in securing funding, as well as making sure that we're not wasting the town's time and money, as well as the state's time, and making sure that we have a concept that everyone has kind of vetted and is really what's in the best interest of the town. So just for those who aren't familiar with the project, it begins at Taylor Street and continues northerly and goes underneath Route 2. And if you can't hear me or see me, or you can't see the screen, I can zoom in if needed. But the project starts at Taylor Street and continues northerly under Route 2 past the MBTA station and ends at Balsam Lane, the newer subdivision that was created there. We actually met with DOT to look at a longer segment. We wanted this project to actually go all the way to Harwood Avenue. They felt that because of the length and the construction cost, that would make it less advantageous and less competitive within the other realm of projects, Ayer, and all the surrounding communities that have active projects as well. The more expensive this gets, it gets harder to get the funding. So this kind of was a chunk where Mass DOT felt where we could actually get a project through and funded and be competitive as well. So quickly, we'll go over kind of what the goals are of the project. Most of you are familiar with the existing conditions. I won't spend a lot of time on that. And then I want to spend most of the time talking about the two design alternatives and kind of how we arrived at those. And then a quick schedule that we've developed at this point. Obviously, it's going to be very fluid depending on decisions made here and review time by Mass DOT as well. And if you have questions, if we want, let me just get through the two concepts and feel free to.
We'll go through your presentation first, and if there are questions after, we just ask folks to state your name for the record, and we'll take them in order.
So really, kind of how we started in this project is we want to take a complete streets approach. Now the town has a complete streets policy, so that certainly helped drive this decision to take this approach. And there was a lot of identification of this Foster Street corridor within the master plan that talked about facilities that aren't being provided certain types of transportation modes, and specifically pedestrians and bicycles. So really that gives us an opportunity to kind of look at things holistically and contextually, knowing what the Foster Street corridor is planned for and the development that's kind of been happening there. We want to make sure that we kind of really design Foster Street to incorporate future development and some recommendations in the master plan. So what are we doing? We're definitely, we know that there's a lack of pedestrian and bicycle facilities. That's kind of our number one overarching goal we're trying to accomplish, either whether it's a sidewalk, whether it's a path, whether it's bike lanes. We want to be able to move people up and down this corridor without necessarily having to get in their car and drive, especially with some of the larger employment centers within Foster Street. And you'll even see that if you go on Google and look on the street view, you can see people walking on the roadway. It looks to be, whether it's some of the commercial, not commercial, some of the office parks, people walk at lunchtime, they're walking in the roadway. And obviously the huge advantage of having the MBTA here is we're really going to try to connect different transportation nodes. They call it, Mass DOT likes to refer to it as the last mile. How do we connect that last mile if someone wants to take the train to and from Littleton to get to their place of employment or their place of residence? And so that's kind of an opportunity to really connect this, improve the last mile, so to speak, of infrastructure. The pavement condition is kind of an obvious one, is making sure that, you know, the town takes advantage of state funding to not have to worry about maintaining this over the next 20 to 30 years. It's a 30-year pavement design we use. There's some geometric issues with curves and sight distance, so we're going to try to look at improving those for safety. It's a good opportunity to add wayfinding and directional signage to the MBTA for both people who live in town and also out of region commuters who use the commuter rail. There's some room to improve stormwater. Stormwater has kind of been a problem on Foster Street. There's been areas of ponding and poor drainage. You know, there is a closed drainage system. However, there's spots where we're going to look to improve that, and not necessarily whether, you know, through using pipes and catch basins, trying to introduce more of a natural vegetative way to manage stormwater. There's some lighting deficiencies at the Route 2 overpass. So obviously we want to get more people to walk. We want them to feel comfortable walking here, even after hours. So we're going to look at that. And along the MBTA, trying to really promote a more of a walkable environment on Foster Street. Pavement markings and signage, that's kind of more of infrastructure, very outdated. We want to make sure that we're using the latest traffic or compliant traffic signage. Improving the safety is kind of an overarching goal. And of course, I mentioned before that the supporting the master plan. And there's a lot of good information in that master plan. I won't go through it here, but it's certainly available. Quickly, the existing conditions. This photo is kind of interesting looking at it because it really hits on a lot of things we're trying to solve here. And I kind of pointed them out with arrows. You can actually, if you look really closely, you can actually see, this is, for example, we were out on site just doing an inspection. You can see someone walking in the shoulder there, and of course, you know, no sidewalk against traffic, so not a desirable condition at all that we want to see. So there's a problem. The second, right next to that arrow on the top, you can see there's a lot of utility poles along the side of the road, which are very close. And actually don't meet the adequate clear zone requirements by Mass DOT. And placement of those poles is going to be critical when we try to implement a sidewalk or a side path. Being sensitive to where those utility poles, we don't want to put them in the middle of our sidewalk or path. So that's kind of an important issue. Another arrow obviously is the lack of sidewalk or pedestrian facility. The arrow in the middle is obviously you can barely make out the yellow center line, so pavement markings, updating all of the signs along the corridor and markings, especially I'm sure during foggy conditions, rainy conditions, night conditions, I'm sure driving is certainly a challenge, and now that we introduce pedestrian and bike facilities, the last thing we want is not knowing drivers where they're supposed to be traveling. You can see some of the crack seal and the potholes in the roadway, so there's some pavement deficiency. And you can even see some kind of buildup on the side of the curb line there on the edge of road. That's actually a classic sign of inadequate handling of the drainage system. So water is getting there and it's sitting at the edge of the road, and over time that's going to degrade the shoulder and the pavement material that's there. And so we're going to try to improve some of these areas where there needs to be a way to handle that stormwater that sits there. And then, interestingly enough, you know, the sign that says available real estate kind of shows that this corridor is, you know, identified as economic development corridor in the master plan. I just thought it was kind of interesting to note that kind of all of those issues tie together here for this project and will help make it a successful project if we can support all of these improvements. Here's the Route 2 underpass. You can see it's kind of dark. You can see the really drastic change from light to dark. So it's something we definitely are going to take a look at and study to make sure that we improve any dark spots underneath the bridge. I just wanted to point that out. Here's an older photo looking at the MBTA frontage. Obviously, that's been a huge problem in the past. It's been kind of addressed, but nonetheless, we all know that parking lot is extremely over capacity, which is a good thing. That shows people are using alternative modes and commuting here. But it's something we definitely have to take into consideration in our design and making sure that we work with MBTA and coordinate with the town. I know there's plans to look at additional parking here, so we wanted to, this is mostly for the public and the town to know our understanding of some of these issues. So knowing that we need to coordinate with those entities to address some of these problems, whether it's through this project or through another project, we just want to make it be known that we have to be sensitive to some of these problems that are occurring. Replacement of the guardrails, that'll occur throughout the project as well. There's some steep side slopes. So those are kind of the existing conditions that I wanted to highlight. And so for our two proposed alternatives, our first alternative definitely takes care of what we're trying to accomplish. So it includes 5-foot bike lanes, which will take care of our bike accommodation. And it includes the addition of a 5-foot concrete sidewalk, which is great. I think will be a good improvement. The great thing about this concept is that it keeps the bicycles and pedestrians separate, so there's no conflicts. And that's actually really important because on a lot of shared use paths, there's oftentimes a battle for who has the right of way, whether it's a pedestrian or bicycle. And then you try to pass people if you're on a bicycle on a shared use path, and sometimes that can be dangerous. So this is kind of the one advantage of having on-street bicycle lanes. The great thing about this concept as well is that Foster Street is unique where you have a commercial kind of down towards, not commercial, but more of an office environment down towards Taylor Street. But as you continue northward, it gets more residential and there's houses up front closer to the roadway. And so this design alternative will really allow you in the future to kind of carry it seamlessly without having huge change in character in front of people's houses as you get to the more residential areas, which I know can be of concern if hey, someone's putting a bike path in front of my front yard. What is that going to do to my property values, or are people going to trespass? So sometimes there can be kind of a stigma of that's a negative thing. So this alternative fits nicely within the right of way moving northward. Now that could be years down the road when we look at that section. Some disadvantage of this project, or this concept, is it does have the most amount of right-of-way impact. So I believe it's 6 permanent easements that would need to be required to build this. It will require widening of the roadway, which is inherently going to promote higher speeds, which we don't necessarily want either. And that's kind of a big deal. We don't want people speeding out here if we're trying to accommodate bikes and peds. It's the last thing we want. The 85th percentile speed, which we measure, is already at a healthy number for that corridor. I think it was like 38 miles per hour. So that's over the posted speed. We don't want people going even faster than that, which happens when you put a nice brand new paved road down, nice wide shoulders. There's dozens of studies that show that it increases speed. So we need to be sensitive to that, what we're trying to accomplish. And the one thing that's going to really make this challenging from a utility perspective is that the right-of-way does not allow us to put a grass buffer or any sort of separation between the sidewalk and the roadway. Where do we put the utility poles that we showed out there? And that's going to be a big challenge, and it could be very costly to the Littleton Light and Water, to the water department, Light and Water, to do that. So we're going to have to really take a look at that. That's definitely a disadvantage of this alternative, is to have no buffer, and it's not as comfortable for the pedestrian. It's less snow storage as well. But this is kind of just a quick snippet of what the roadway will look like for that alternative. And these concept plans are on the wall if you need to take a closer look at them. I'm more than happy to zoom in on them as well on screen afterwards. But this is the entire corridor. Like I mentioned, it's a 10-foot travel lane, so that's actually a little bit narrower than it is now. There's really not a, the travel lane is generally like 14 feet wide now. There's no striped shoulder. So that's an improvement. However, the shoulder is going to be wider now at 5 feet. The construction cost of this project is about $2.89 million. Now that includes the utilities, the police details, which can be very costly during construction, and some contingencies. So that's an all-in cost. So that's a Mass DOT endorsed cost. That is what they have budgeted for the TIP project. And I mentioned before, it's about 6 permanent easements as it currently stands now until we refine the design. Now 2 of those easements are the actual Mass DOT themselves and the MBTA. So not necessarily large transfers of money that will happen from the town. They're actually more of a maintenance agreement for allowing the town to basically maintain the facility. They're not actually acquisitions, but there are formal documents that need to be recorded for that. So, looking at, similar projects or projects that, we've done as a company in the past, 6 permanent easements, that's not a lot. So, that's nothing that is a project stopper, but it's something we definitely have to be sensitive about, and we'll show you some of those locations where the easements are if people have concerns. They're very minor in nature, but the minute a slight piece of sidewalk or a bike path goes out of town property, even if it's a couple inches, we're required by law to have a permanent easement there. So very minor in nature. There's no taking of someone's house or major alterations to the property. And so alternative number 2 is a 10-foot wide shared use path with a 3-foot wide grass buffer. Now the roadway actually is slightly narrowed in most of the corridor through this alternative, so we actually can reduce the pavement width, which is really great. So that'll promote a little bit lower speed. This has a 2-foot shoulder, so almost a very similar type of feel that the roadway is now. In fact, if not a little bit smaller, which is great. And we do that because we have to fit the 10-foot wide path. And so this path will accommodate both pedestrians and bicyclists. The great thing about this is, like we said, we got the buffer, so we have room to put utilities, and it's even a greater separation between the non-motorized and the motorized traffic. Shared use paths also have a more, I would say they're more family friendly. As a father of 2, I certainly would be more apt to take my children out on a shared use path and go biking down Foster Street with them on a bike lane. But that's not to say that avid bikers who commute to work would rather ride on a roadway. That also is the case. So I would say that the shared use paths typically appeal to a larger audience versus the bike lanes typically are geared for more of the single occupancy, or you're commuting, you're using the bike to get to your job or place of employment. And this is the safest, there's no question for bicycles and pedestrians, this is the safest alternative by taking them completely off the roadway. This also has the least amount of property impacts as well. This has 5 permanent easements versus 6. And they're very minor, like I mentioned before. These are like the inch or the 6-inch, the sidewalks on your property about 6 inches, and you got to take a small easement. They're not very large. This also improves the crossing at the MBTA at-grade rail, and you'll see that in one of the blow-ups how the path kind of winds into the rail at a 90-degree angle. So it really forces pedestrians and bikers to stop 90 degrees or perpendicular to the rail line, and we'll put a gate and actually stop them, which is a good improvement. And the nice thing that I didn't put up here is that the construction cost is almost identical to this. So this is not more costly, which Oftentimes, when you change to a shared use path, they are more costly because there's more driveway crossings. It's difficult to cross some of the driveways. But in this case, there's very few residential properties along the corridor. There are a few, but they're not as much as there's not as many as when you go farther north on Foster Street. Disadvantages is obviously the maintenance during the winter months. The question is, who maintains this trail, basically, or this side path. And then obviously,
Who would do such a thing?
Well, a lot of times, people question, does the homeowner have to maintain this? It's in front of their house, or does
In
the park
Littleton, the
maintain it?
answer is no. We maintain it.
And there's your answer. But nonetheless, it's a cost, something that you got to take into consideration. And if you wanted to continue this shared use path to Harwood Ave, moving it forward to future phases, it will be challenging to finish those segments, mostly due to the side slopes and the more residential properties. So that's something you consider for long range. Is it feasible? Absolutely. But it was important to note that here. And then during construction, this project might be slightly more disruptive to the public, and that's primarily due to the fact that this alternative requires the pavement to be fully reclaimed. It's a pavement reclamation process, which basically a machine comes out and it grinds up the entire roadway, and it's very loud, and typically it's an alternating one-way traffic. So it can be disruptive for that short period of time, so it's worth noting that. It is our feeling it's short-term pain, long-term gain type of situation.
Nick, I'm sorry to interrupt.
Sure.
Are you talking about just replacing the multi-use path, or are you talking about the roadway itself?
No, so the reclamation would be, in order to put the path in, we have to actually move the center of the roadway slightly away from where it is, fit it on the side of the road.
Okay.
Because obviously the path's a lot lighter than the sidewalk and degrading. So we need to be able to move the roadway. We can't just use what's called a milling machine, which is mill the roadway up where it gets kind of bumpy, you drive on it, and repave. We actually have to take out the entire roadway. And there's not a new technique, but there's a more sustainable method of doing that, and it's called reclaiming the roadway, which basically takes up the old roadway, grinds it up, and uses that old roadway as a base material for the new roadway. And it saves a lot of money. It's almost, it's only a couple dollars more a square yard than milling, so it's a no-brainer for this project, but it is more disruptive. It's, you can't, when you reclaim, you have to put it right down immediately, and it's almost like you're driving on gravel for, a week or two until the contractor's able to pave. Versus when you mill, you're driving on asphalt, it's just a little rough. So it's important to note that. It's not a huge game changer by any stretch of the imagination, just worthwhile to note that. And like I said before, the construction cost, it's only slightly more than the sidewalk alternative, about $200,000. And this is still approximate. When we actually did a detailed estimate, it wasn't for the shared use path, it was for the sidewalk alternative. So we actually think that $3 million can be extrapolated down a little bit as we move forward in design, if that's the alternative we move forward with. And again, the five permanent easements, 2 of which are Mass DOT and MBTA, so they're not really, they're more programmatic than anything. And I can certainly zoom in on any of these areas in further detail. Now, the recommended alternative that Fuss and O'Neill is recommending to the town is the shared use path alternative. Basically, we feel that it is the most safest for the bikes and peds. And these type of facilities, given the economic development opportunities, shared use paths are often good catalysts for those type of mixed use development. And as a comfort, level of comfort, I think, given on what the needs are of the town, we feel that, given the construction costs, that we're recommending alternative number 2. Quickly, just the schedule, and this is just approximate. So where we are right now, we are actually let's see, that fourth bubble, that public engagement bubble. So the project started back in July, where we had a kickoff, and then we finished up survey in September. And this past fall, we were working on these concepts, refining them. As part of the Mass DOT process, we have to look at, there were other alternatives we looked at, which included a sidewalk on both sides of the roadway. That's a Mass DOT Healthy Transportation Policy Directive. They require us to do that. That came with significant right-of-way and construction costs, so that was eliminated. We also look at roundabouts at all the major side street intersections, and see if they are A, warranted, and B, what are the cost impacts associated. We do signal warrants at all of the intersections, so we did a signal warrant at Taylor Street. We did a signal warrant at Balsam Lane, I believe. Rachel will have to correct me on that. And obviously, we did not meet the traffic signal warrants at those locations. So we do have, these are not just what we looked at. We looked at a lot of different design alternatives, and this is ultimately kind of what we came out with is, of recommending to the town that these two will satisfy really the needs of the project. And, because this is a Mass DOT project, we kind of have to play by their rules a little bit if we want to get, $3 million worth of funds. So these kind of satisfy both the town and, make Mass DOT happy as well. So moving forward, we're looking to submit a 25% design plan to Mass DOT right around April 1st, assuming that we can get the required motion tonight and have our meeting with Mass DOT. Now, this project, in terms of construction, people always ask, when is it going to be built? When are we going to work on it, right? That's the big question. That really depends on when the project is programmed on the tip. So, in a perfect world, if this project were to be funded and endorsed by the MPO, which I believe there's even an item tonight about having a representative for MAPC, the soonest we'd be able to get this constructed and advertised would be summer of 2021. So about 2.5 years and change, you would see a shovel in the ground, a contract notice. That's assuming that this project is funded and is a very competitive realm of projects right now. So that's in a perfect world, and we're optimistic that maybe that could happen. But that'll be up to the town elected MPO designee to really advocate, and the town to really be vocal about moving this project and getting it funded by the state. And so that whole second half, that phase 2, is very, that can be as early as 2 years, or it could be 10 years if the town decides to put the brakes on it or not advocate for it. So it's really in the town's hands. Once we submit that 25% design to DOT, we have to get it to the design public hearing as fast as possible, and we will work as their consultant very hard to push them to do that. And that's considered a shovel-ready project when you have your design public hearing. And then after that point, it's up to the town to really advocate strongly for that project and hopefully get it funded in 2021. But we'll cross that bridge when we get there, so to speak.
Okay.
Other than that, that's all we had for presentation.
Thank you very much, Nick. I think procedurally what I'll do is I'll see if Chris has anything to add on behalf of the Highway Department and see if the board members have any initial questions, and we'll open it up for the public. Again, when you're addressing the engineer or the board, please just state your name for the record. After we exhaust questions, we'll close the hearing and then go into a deliberative session with the board and give you the vote that you need to go forward.
Yeah, so, obviously, you just heard the project. What we are here today is to hopefully get the board to endorse one of these two options. I have had discussions with representatives from the MPO regarding this project, and they believe it is a very competitive project. So the quicker we can move through this process, obviously the better. I have funding reserved for design all the way through, so that won't be a hindrance for us, and the state does know that. So that's looked at as beneficial to us from the state and the MPO's perspective. So I'll open it up to you folks and questions.
Board members, for starters?
I don't have any questions.
Chase?
I got a whole bunch, so maybe.
Okay. He's the engineer on the board, all right?
Great.
Which is good.
Yeah. I have a quick one. If we're thinking about the future, going further up Foster Street, which one of these plans better fits the rest of the Foster Street?
Well, we can do it either way. We can go both ways. Realistically, moving up the street on Foster, Mass DOT has not much of an appetite to fund that, so we'll be funding that in-house. We will definitely not need to go through Mass DOT's hoops if we want to do it, so we have the ability to take this design and make it cheaper, so to speak. We can do it either way, really. It's a matter of, like Nick said, some people might not want a bike lane in front of their house, so we could transition the shared use path into bike lanes and a sidewalk up there, or we could just end up, if you choose to go with the sidewalk route, then we would kind of continue with that path all the way down.
Yeah, and it's totally acceptable to stop the path. Really, the idea is to kind of get the path in the major economic corridor. You certainly can, at the end where Balsam Lane crosses, there'll be I don't want to call it a trailhead, but a identifiable terminus to the path that could easily transition to a sidewalk network, and on-road bike lanes or sharing the road.
Okay.
Something that's much less cost prohibitive for the town to undertake. Because certainly, although we're recommending alternative 2, the sidewalks are going to be much more feasible to implement going north. There's no question. In terms from a cost standpoint only.
Okay.
And certainly feasible either way, but.
Okay. Chase?
Anthony, could you flip back to the schematic of option 2?
Nick
Nick's
was
got it.
driving that.
Sorry.
No worries. So just the schematic, ooh, a couple more back. Yeah, there we go. What I'm curious about is if we went with a multi-use path farther up the road, what scope changes would we see? Because let's assume the town is funding that and Mass DOT isn't. What scope changes would we see if the town was funding it farther up the road than what we have?
You would see the exact same thing. The
would,
difference
okay.
is, the plan sets would not look like what we're gonna submit to Mass DOT.
Okay, but on the ground, it would
On the ground, it
essentially-
would look, if we decided to go with this, continued up the road, it would look 100% identical.
Okay.
I could build this for a fraction of the cost, because what Fuss and O'Neill has to go through with Mass DOT submittals and everything, that's what balloons the cost of these projects.
Okay.
But it would look absolutely
It would
identical.
look like that if we
Absolutely.
went with a multi-use path.
Yeah,
Okay.
absolutely identical.
I mean, in fact, we'd have a little more leeway in terms of, shy distances and clearances. There are specific, design criteria we have to maintain for this path. So we do have a little more wiggle room. Say if there was a wall or, there's a lot of stone walls along the street. If we needed to kind of get the path closer to the road, we could do that. And kinda
In other
cheat
words, you
it.
could pinch in the grass buffer a little bit if
Exactly.
you needed to.
We
or
don't like to
something.
do that. I mean, we do a lot of work in Northampton. It's a very urban environment, but it's also very, kind of like progressive and up and coming. They're like the forefront of a lot of the shared use path stuff in urban environments, and we've done paths right up against the curb line, which, again, being a father and having my kids out there, and my kid's gonna ride their bike right off the path and in the roadway, off the curb, that's not the best situation, but you can do it, and we've done it before, and
Okay.
with not a lot of negative results that's come out of that, so.
One of the things you talked about was if we pursue alternative 2, you're gonna have to, reconstruct the roadway. How does the lifetime of the roadway differ between alternative 1 and alternative 2, given that we've got 2 different construction methods going into them?
Sure, so alternative 1, we still very might well reclaim the roadway. We're actually, we just contracted a drilling company to take cores and samples of the pavement. Both designs are 50-year pavement designs.
Okay.
So,
30.
or 30 years. Some cases they're 50 on interstates. They're not actually 50 years, but the pavement is technically supposed to last that long. So in a case where we'd mill the roadway, we would actually be adding a lot more asphalt versus if we reconstruct it, we could be, instead of, say if we reconstruct, we could probably put down, 4 inches of pavement versus if we mill, we might mill out 2, but we might put back 5. So there's still the same type of, design here, and there's different methodologies we use to calculate that. But in the end, the town's is going to be getting a similar product. Now, alternative two, there's no question you're going to get a much better product because you're basically ripping up the entire roadway and the base, and you're recompacting everything, so you're not going to get any cracks that might reflect up after a couple years. But in terms of the actual design, does that answer your question?
I think so. So what I'm hearing you say is maybe alternative two has a slightly slightly longer effective life without
Yes,
significant
correct.
maintenance, but you don't see a major difference
In
between.
terms of what basically, after 10 years, the town, or 15 years, the town's going to have to mill it again anyway, regardless of what type
No,
of
no.
structure we do.
We use pavement preservation here the last 25.
Oh, the last 25? Well, we'll see.
For all intents and
I wouldn't stamp
purposes,
that,
for all
but-
intents and purposes, they're basically the same.
Okay, you
Yeah.
said what I'm saying. Okay.
Yeah.
Talk to me about materials on the shared use path.
Bitumen. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Why bituminous versus a poured concrete?
Cost.
Just
It's
cost.
10 feet wide, so you're literally doubling the cost of concrete. And asphalt, we can send basically the equivalent of a driveway paver and time. It's
Okay.
substantially faster to pave a 10-foot shared use path than it is to pour even a 5-foot concrete. So,
Okay. And that's both in terms of short-term and long-term costs?
yeah, because what I would do is I can actually maintain that 10-foot path as if it's a travel lane. So I can crack seal it, I can microsurface it, I can do all the same pavement preservation techniques on the shared use path as I can on the road.
Yeah, there's actually separate funding that comes available to Mass DOT to maintain paths, asphalt paths. So that's kind of another thing. A 10-foot wide concrete path would basically make this project not competitive. It would be cost prohibitive. And in terms of a lot of people, I don't know if there's any studies that have been out there, but typically concrete is less conducive for bicycle traffic in terms of the friction and the slip resistance. It can be, you really have to make sure you have a nice broomed finish on it, and sometimes that doesn't happen at joints, versus the asphalt is more of a conducive for bicycle traffic, rubberized bicycle traffic.
Okay, one last question, and then leave it to the public. In terms of differences in speed, I got a C in transportation design, so, but one of the things I do that does stick out is for every additional foot of travel lane, there's a non-trivial amount of additional speed that goes into that. So if alternative two, we're effectively looking at, what do we have? 2 feet of shoulder, and alternative one, if we count the bike lane, you've got 5 feet of shoulder /
Right.
bike lane, right? If you had to estimate the difference in speed between those two, can you help me
man, I
put it in
could-
context?
Man, I don't know if I could say for a fact.
I got a good example.
Understand.
King
It'd
Street
be-
versus New Estate Road. There's the difference, basically. King Street's got a fairly wide shoulder. New Estate Road has a very narrow shoulder, small lanes. Those are basically your differences. King Street, New Estate Road.
It's mostly the perception that as a driver you feel more, constrained, and that the willingness to take a risk to drive faster typically is reduced.
I mean, to be honest with you, one of the concerns that I've had expressed to me about this project is you're going to take a road that's falling apart and people drive accordingly. And you're going to make it beautiful.
Make it right.
And that's going to cause a problem. So the idea that alternative two gives us any leeway to cut down speeds is probably the single most attractive component of it to me. The
And that's kinda what
multi-use
we
aspect is great, but
Right.
anything we can do to knock down that speed. What I'm trying to do is understand if that's, you think in your professional experience, that's 1 mile an hour or 5 miles an hour.
Again, we actually haven't studied what the effect of that is in terms of just reduction in shoulder, but I would say it's, if the 80th percentile speed right now is around 38 miles per hour, we should be seeing a reduction maybe 2 to 3 miles per hour, so somewhere around 35. Generally
Okay, so you're going to put that in his contract?
Absolutely. We got it on record.
I'll make sure I do it. We're going to put some speed bumps out there too.
No, that's fine. I'm not trying to put, I just want to understand.
Typically with a 10-foot wide travel lane and a 2-foot wide shoulder, 35 miles per hour is kind of at the limit of a comfortable, as a driver being comfortable.
Okay.
You feel like the roadway is gonna feel a lot narrower than what it is right now. Right now, it's 26 to 28 feet wide in some spots with no shoulder. So you feel like you have this super wide lane that you can just cruise down. It's gonna feel a lot smaller than that. About 3 feet wider, which is, that's a good section narrowing, so.
Thank you, guys, and thank all of you for your patience.
Oh, that was useful, helpful. Okay, members of the public. Sure.
Gary Wilson, 1 Wilson Lane. So just curious, the extension of this, I mean, I know when this was originally pitched, we were really looking forward to going to Harwood Ave. So are we capable of doing the design to Harwood Ave on this, or we would be hiring out to have that done? I guess that's one question. Because it makes sense to do it as close to timing-wise as this project, just to continue it. It would be on our dollar. This is fantastic that potentially could be on the state. But just moving it forward, because I know this portion, though, it is great. I know how it fits into the master plan and development. Let's be honest, the areas that are very tight are further down the road where all the residents live, right? So that's just kind of something that I've been thinking about. I know originally when we talked about this. So how's the next phase of this? Because it needs to go to Harwood and beyond.
Yeah, we were originally talking about this as a 2-phase project. It looks like it's more than that now, Chris, is that right?
Well, realistically, it would be a 2-phase to get us to Harwood, and then probably 1 more phase to get us from Foster down to, from Harwood down to the sidewalks on Foster Street.
How about what Gary was saying in terms of our doing it part of ourselves?
So, yes, the answer is yes, we can design this in-house. The time that it would take me solely to design this second phase would be unrealistic. What I would look to do is to have a Fuss and O'Neill or somebody design it to our standards, not Mass DOT standards, and then we could construct it with our money. As far as time frame, you might actually be able to build that before the state gives us the money for the tip part of it.
That's for sure.
We'd have to start looking at it as far as getting a conceptual design together and figure out what we want to do with the intersection of Harwood.
I thought we'd settled that.
I was trying not to say it, but
Say it.
we have no idea yet what we would do. We'd have to do an intersection study to figure out what's the best alternative at the intersection, and then put a dollar number on it and see how we can fit it in programming wise into our funding internally. But yes, that's the next step, is logically just start moving down the line.
You didn't want to say the word Rotary.
I didn't.
Good,
It's
good.
roundabout.
Don't say it.
We
Don't say
voted,
it.
we voted on a meeting, you weren't here, Paul, sorry, it's a Rotary.
Mr. Wilson, a follow-up?
So why wouldn't this be done sooner than later? I guess that's where I'm going with it. It's more of, we know the timeline on this is pretty close to locked in if it happens. So we should probably be talking about doing that other piece. We know it needs to be done. So that's what I mean. Can the design happen at the same time? And if it makes sense to use the current contractor to do that design, where they're already,
Yeah, we would
halfway there, that's all.
realistically utilize Fuss and O'Neill. They've already done base survey for most of that.
Probably have to go out to bid anyway, though, right, wouldn't we?
For design purposes?
No?
For
Oh, that's right,
construction.
design, you're right, yep, yep.
But, I mean,
Construction, you'd want to bid it for sure.
in the end of the day, we have multiple roads that are bad too.
But
The
I
only thing that-
assume that the relevant point is, with this change in the percentage of the project that's now considered for this,
Yeah, what we can do is-
you gotta be rethinking it in
Yeah,
some
we
respects.
can have Fuss and O'Neill start working up a design proposal for cost to do that next phase and start looking at that at a municipal level project, not a Mass DOT compliant project.
The only consideration is to try to take, it's still gonna cost the town, in terms of construction value, it's still not gonna be, it's not gonna be pocket change, so I'm just making sure that the town is taking advantage of any grant opportunities, or, I'm not saying it's a Mass Works candidate or a Complete Streets program candidate, but, anything to do to help ease that pain when it comes time. Because the last thing you want to do is spend a bunch of money on design and then realize, oh, this is going to cost $2 million. The town can't fund that. So be realistic about that. That's just some recommendation that.
Okay. Did you have another question, Joe? Okay. Other residents, questions, input?
However, I thank you for the suggestion. The question is, how much is gonna cost for the town? Maybe they can do phase one first and the phase second a little bit later. That'd be nice. And also, I like the number one, because you have the sidewalk too, and also the bicycle. It would be a better idea to have the sidewalk, so people can walk from the station all the way down to the town.
I think that's consistent in most of the plans.
It's worth it, extra couple $100,000.
If only that was what it would cost.
Thank you.
Yeah. Well, thank you. Any others, folks? Okay, ma'am?
Kristen Warren, 217 Foster. I personally like alternate two, being a person who's walked to the train from my house down to the train station. I like having that buffer between the car and the walking trail. Thank you.
Great, thank you. That kind of input is welcome. Foster Street resident back here.
Betsy Bowling, 116 Foster Street. Chase asked some of my questions, so I'm good there. I piggyback on what Gary said as well. But I also say, my vote would be on two based on what I've heard today. And I think that path would be used, not only just to get to and from the train station, I think other people would use it. And I definitely view it as an economic development down that, it would make that commercial, industrial area down there look a lot more appealing and so on.
Thank you very much. Other folks? Going once, going twice, yes, sir?
How far is this first
Again, for the record, gotta have your name. Gotta have your name for the record.
Because I don't hear that well.
Okay.
Ralph Lang.
Thank you, Ralph.
How far is this first phase going? Is it going all the way to Harwood or stopping at Balsam Lane?
It's going from Taylor Street to Balsam Lane.
That's it?
Yeah, we originally asked Mass DOT to fund all the way to Harwood Ave.
Yeah.
But Mass DOT said due to the cost of that phase, they couldn't support that portion of it.
Because I know the second phase is gonna probably cost you more money. Because there's a lot of barrel block type drains in that section going up further. And they basically, I think the town's aware of it, gotta be replaced.
Oh, yeah,
Because
absolutely.
when they clean them out now, there are all the bricks in there, the barrel blocks moving around.
Yep.
And they need to be replaced with single structured manholes.
Yep, we're aware of
And
that.
you probably got one manhole down where you were talking earlier, down by that sign way up, that water's collecting in there, you're probably gonna have to put one in there. And you could drain it out off the side right there, because that's a drop off. And you got it right away off the town land or roads anyway, so you got the right to put it right there and drain it right off.
We're definitely looking at all of
No
that.
problem there.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Just asking.
No, good input, thank you. All right, if there's not any others, but the intent here would be to close the hearing and then have board deliberation toward a recommendation vote. Is that what we're looking for? Yes,
Yes,
okay.
sir.
Mr. Bergman,
If I could just.
for the record, although we all know who you are.
Yeah, Keith Bergman, your MAPC representative. And in that capacity, I'd offer that this project is on the radar screen for the region and for the MAPC region as a whole and the Magic sub-region in particular, because everyone in our region looks to the Littleton train station as a transportation hub, and anything to make it safer and better is something that is appealing to all of our neighbors. So, and we will keep that on the radar screen as this goes through the MPO process, because it's, the most important thing to get it start moving is to complete 100% design. As soon as it's ready to go, then you stand a chance of having the cash allotted for the project. And so as soon as the final design is completed, the town's responsible for 25%, MassDOT will complete the 100%. And I agree with Chris's comment that this has a lot of institutional support.
Okay. You've been officially retired now about a week? Is that what it is?
A week from, yeah, next week.
No, next week.
He's not even retired yet. He hasn't. Thank you very much, Keith. Okay, terrific. Then I would entertain a motion to close the hearing, please.
So moved.
Second?
Okay, the motion's been made by Selectman Knox and seconded by Selectman Gerbic to close the public hearing. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed? The ayes have it. Okay, deliberation on the proposals, I think it's pretty straightforward. Input, suggestions?
I think it was an excellent presentation. I appreciate the pros and cons of both of the proposals. So, I mean, personally, I'm in favor of concept two, just because of the the pedestrian safety component to it, and it doesn't really have an impact on the speed on the roadway,
Right.
to the best that we're aware of, so,
At least that's the happy talk.
yeah, yeah.
Okay, Chase?
I think generally comfortable with approach two, but a little more bearish on it, simply because of how the transitional look and feel to the residences down the road from there. That is that what we're proposing to do is put in a multi-use path, and though I recognize that we can transition to a sidewalk-based mode of pedestrian transportation, I think that's probably less likely if we go with alternative two.
Right.
Furthermore, I don't like the idea of keeping it narrow in the industrial corridor and then opening up the road in the residential corridor. Those are the opposite things that we would want.
Right.
I'm a little concerned about how residents will view a multi-use path, sort of essentially going through not their property, what they may perceive to be their property within the easement. And as much as alternative 1 and 2 have small amounts of easement requirements in this stretch, that changes dramatically when we go down the road, because this stretch has maybe a half a dozen houses in it. Down the road, that's a very different proposition.
Sure.
If, I agree, keep in mind, if you were to transition to a sidewalk in the residential neighborhood, you're adding another 5 feet of width here. Because you have the 5 foot and the 3 foot.
That's if, now, there's nothing saying, the town needs to decide, you know, what, although we want to take a complete streets approach, a 5-foot bike lane, that there's other alternatives necessarily to doing that. We could share the road, we could widen the street to the most feasible extent practicable, which is a word.
In the
Look it up.
non-mass, in the town.
In the
town
phase 2.
portion.
So we don't have to widen the road.
If we get the first phase built on the design proposed in alternative 2, we'd have the benefit of at least a little bit of time of
Absolutely.
experience to say, do we like this?
Right.
Or do we want to transition, even at some other cost, to into the other design for the lower level?
You technically could leave the road moving forward and still have a complete street in phase 2. Leave the roadway width where it is, just add a sidewalk right next to it. Technically, because it's the town administered process, we're not going through DOT. There's certain standards, you know, we could do a 4-foot shoulder, you know, with share the road signs or other,
We
you
have a lot
know.
more flexibility.
There's more flexibility.
And that's
But I
ultimately why I'm
understand- and I understand
comfortable
where
with
you're coming from.
alternative two, is that I think we haven't closed ourselves off to options
No.
through the more residential portion of the streets, because I do expect the residents may want to see something, maybe they don't, maybe I've got a bad read on this, want to see something slightly different than what's been laid out here, even if, frankly, even if the sidewalk ultimately does have a greater width, the perception of
The
a
perception,
sidewalk
yes.
going through their property, even if it eats up more
Yeah,
of their
absolutely.
property, is a different thing.
Oh, yeah. Yep.
Okay, great. Selectman North?
No, I'm in favor too. Well, they've said all reasons.
Yeah, I mean, thinking of it both as a sometime pedestrian, oftentimes driver, I would prefer the option of having a little strip of land that, you know, if I had to encounter something, I'd rather it be a bicycle than a car. I've actually had the experience of both, but I don't know how many people would hit by a car here, but I have. Anyway, and again, we do have we preserve the right to make some modifications in the next phase, right?
Correct.
Okay. Does anyone on the board want to make a motion? We do have suggested language somewhere, Anthony, do we? Or
Yeah.
who's got it now?
Can I?
Nick?
Oh,
you
sure,
got it?
sorry.
No, Nick's. So just select when it pops up. Option 2, concept 2,
Okay.
fill in the blank.
Can you actually read that, Cindy?
Sure. Move that the Board of Selectmen vote to approve concept 2 for the Foster Street from Taylor Street to Balsam Lane Tip Transportation Improvement Program project.
That's good. Period.
That's it?
Said concept two, yep.
Yeah. Should I read concept two?
Yeah.
Yeah. Concept two, 2 10-foot wide travel lanes, 2-foot wide shoulders, 2.5-foot wide grass strip, and a 10-foot wide separated shared use path located on the north side of Foster Street.
Second.
Okay, the motion's been made by Selectman Napoli, seconded by Selectman Knox. Any further discussion?
It's 6 inches here, but the picture shows 3 feet of grass buffer.
Yeah, it's supposed to be 3, but.
Okay.
You should have got better than a C plus and.
Because I can tell.
Yeah, it should be 3.
He actually said C.
C, I boosted.
C plus.
Okay.
There we go.
Move to amend the motion, so it reflects 3.
All right, we'll assume that amendment's been made somewhere. All right, all those in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? The ayes have it. Thank you very much. Great job presenting this.
Thank you. Thanks for the opportunity.
Right. Now it's all in Keith's hands.
That's it.
Take it over the finish line, Keith.
Okay, and we will return to the topic we were discussing, Town Administrator Search Committee. Most of you are enough veterans of town board meetings to know that when we have a scheduled public hearing, we have to start when it starts. So Nancy, I know you were addressing the topic of the emails that were sent to board members. Okay.
Well, I appreciate all the work that was done with all the people involved to select a new town administrator, which it hasn't actually happened yet. I'm just disappointed. I have other questions, but does the bylaw that you currently were using, does it allow the Board of Selectmen to extend the list of finalists?
Yeah, I think the wording on, I don't have it in front of me, though, is that we take the recommendations of the task committee and then we either accept them or reject them. We're free to start the process over again, I think is how it's worded, more than just add people to it. But in any event, there's been no suggestion from any board member that they're dissatisfied and want to do that, although they can say so at any time.
I'll give you the exact.
You get the wording there?
Yeah, the choice that the Board of Selectmen has in front of it now, according to the bylaw, is to conduct final interviews as required. This is direct language on it. Appoint a candidate to the position by majority vote, or send back to task with directions for further action.
And again, we took delivery of the recommendations last Wednesday. We were all present, all members of the Selectmen anyways. There was one missing member of the task committee. And we accepted those recommendations and agreed on a process for going forward at that time. Not to say the board members couldn't raise any doubts from that point till now, but that's the opportunity that's before us.
Because I feel, well, I wasn't interviewing the people like you were and reviewing all the resumes, but I found that Anthony was doing a great job.
Okay, I'm gonna ask you not to get into names of candidates, and we, you know,
The
we're.
new person that you hire will have to wear many hats. They don't have the information that they need. I know that's a learning process, but right now, we need to have someone who's here already, someone who knows all the things that's happening. A lot of things are happening in Littleton right now, major changes, and so I would hope you would reconsider. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Nancy. Other folks, I know there's been interest in the subject matter.
If you, to your question, Nancy, about how many pieces of correspondence that we got, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I've got 8 pieces of correspondence that we've got, including yours and several other members of the audience today.
And we weren't soliciting them, but we welcome them for what it's worth either way. Gino?
Sorry to bother you again. I understand without mentioning any names, the present assistant administrator. I just wanted to let you know that he's doing his best in 2 years. As long, without mentioning any name, as long as he consider it on the final. That's all. Thank
Okay,
you.
all right. Well, we have, Sue.
Sue Raymond, you know.
Yep.
I guess, I think we're just kind of shocked that a lot of people see the current interim administrator, without mentioning any names, as doing a fine job, and some people who are on the committee who recommend his being hired assumed that he was being groomed for the town administrator. And now we're finding he's not even on the list of 3 people. And one of these people is an assistant town administrator, I believe, for a population of roughly 3,000. Another one is assistant for roughly 7,000. And there's one that's quite a bit higher.
So if you'll allow me to correct that, one is a sitting town administrator for a community of 3,000 to 4,000 people. Has been there for roughly 5 years, although my recollection.
And this part is public records, so we can
This is
say
public
names,
record.
yeah. right.
Another is a sitting town administrator in a community of 6,000 to 7,000.
Right.
And the third is an assistant town manager in a community of about 25,000. So 2 are sitting TAs, 1 is an assistant, 2 are from communities slightly smaller than Littleton, 1 slightly larger than
Right,
Littleton.
I agree. I
And there's a lot of other factors involved in the resumes for the finalists are part of the packet that we were, we're presented, which is all public record, which you can access on the web. You can get hard copies at the town hall. I'll give you mine if you want, but, this information, at least for the finalists, it's fair game to discuss. It's more the privacy of the other candidates that we really can't get into. But we have got your input from each of the individuals. But any other points, questions? All right, Gino?
The selectmen will do a good job.
Hope so, yeah. Well, I'll tell you, when we met last week, the board did express its thanks to the tax. They were very thorough in what they did. They were very professional in their process. We have a couple of members here. Of course, Chase was our representative. Gary Wilson was on the committee as well. I invite Gary if you wanted to add anything to it. But other than that, our intention is to go forward with the interviews with the 3 finalists tomorrow night, potentially to make a selection tomorrow night. We've reserved Wednesday night to do the same. And later on in the meeting, when we have an opportunity to ask the cable folks to turn off the cable, we'll discuss some of the common questions that we're going to ask the interviewees. But, okay, I'm sorry.
Mary Picker, 160 Great Road. What I'd like to know is, can you add another applicant to that interview process tomorrow or the next day?
From what Chase read, that the bylaw said we either have to accept an interview or turn the process back to the task.
That's my reading of the bylaw, is that the Board of Selectmen needs to take up the finalists recommended and choose to either appoint one or not appoint any of them. And then the Board of Selectmen would still be in a position of referring it back to the TA selection committee, although the composition could certainly change at that point.
Gary, did you want to I'm going to put you on the spot. Anything you want to add that we have missed in our discussions here or your committee's work?
No, very obviously difficult process, trying to, 25 applicants, as you know, most either assistant town administrators or town administrators across the region, out of state as far as California. I will honestly say that, it's no secret that the final 5 candidates absolutely will be town administrators or are town administrators, and we knew that. So the debate at that point really among the committee was really splitting hairs to find the final, at least 2 candidates to move forward. And we think we did a thorough job. It's not perfect. Everybody I know has an opinion. It wasn't done just on a whim. There was a lot of time put in, a lot of, 3-4 hour debate nights went into this. So the process, I think, was as fair as it can be, even though it's just an odd process because, in front of the cameras, a lot of open meetings, and we discuss things that are a little uncomfortable probably for the public, but it was a fair process.
All right. Okay, well, again, our intent is to discuss some of the questions we're going to ask later on in the meeting, and tomorrow night, we're meeting here again at 5:30, I think is the first interview.
5:30, we have 10 minutes of getting our house in order,
Right.
and then the first interview begins at 5:40, 75 minutes per interview. 3 candidates.
Okay. We appreciate that a lot of the citizens in town embrace this process and realize how important it is to the town, and we hope that you similarly recognize that all the people who participate from this end, selectmen or task members, are similarly committed to one thing and one thing only, and that's the town's best interest. Anyway, with that, we'll move on to the next topic. Thank you for hanging in with us the extra hour, Keith. You're used to that? Yeah, we have our vacancy on, as Littleton's representative to the Metropolitan Area Planning Council. In the years that he served as Littleton's administrator, Keith has been our representative. Wants to stay on at least through May because you're serving as president right now. Right. And we don't want any impeachments of presidents going on, at least here in Littleton, right?
But I have appreciated very much the opportunity to serve Littleton and serve the region on the Metropolitan Area Planning Council now for the last 10 years. And when in announcing my retirement last year, I was pleased to have the board's support at the time to have me continue to represent Littleton through on the council through the end of my term as MAPC president. My term as president ends in May. MAPC staff recently pointed out to me that my term as your representative ends in January, so that I am here to request respectfully that you at least consider extending my appointment from January to the end of May, so I complete the term as president. I've had a couple of you reach out and say, can it be longer than May? And it can be. I have to say that I've been spending my time since my last day in office here. An awful lot of MAPC meetings. I had 4 last week.
Margaret was one of the people who called and said, "Can it be longer?"
What did you do? And thank you, probably, for getting me out of the house. But that when I travel throughout the region and meet with groups of municipal officials, the story I tell is about Littleton. How can, what is it that regional planning or intermunicipal cooperation can do for your community? The stories that I reach for are all the ones that are things like what we just heard tonight on a transportation-oriented development around the commuter rail station, and many other things that Littleton has been able to do by working with our neighbors. And so I'm happy to continue to pitch.
What would be the ordinary term if you would?
It's a 3-year. It's a 3-year term. My first term was I guess it was in January of 2010. So it's been 9 years. And it's that's by statute. It's the statute. Maybe this sours it, but Chapter 40B, which everyone has heard of, is the chapter that has also established the Metropolitan Area Planning Council and establishes 3-year terms for the reps.
You guys don't advertise that 40B part.
No, the good 40B gets, but so I'm willing to serve for as long as I can be of service to the town. I'd say I would want to help transition Littleton, and I'd love to help when you've got someone who can attend the meetings. That was the other reason why I think you let me do it, because no one else wanted to.
No.
I was, the truth be told, but it was, I think it was to Littleton's great advantage to be active in that organization, and I'm happy to continue to pitch for a town that's been very good to me over the years, but would also be glad over time to help if you identify someone else that's
I think that's, the likelihood at some point, whether it's, somebody full-time personnel or, member of this board or the planning board, and I know that's sometimes the makeup from other communities, but in the interim, my inclination would be to appoint Keith for the full term, and if something changes internally, I'm sure you'll be graceful and.
Oh, absolutely, yeah. It's my understanding that when you're ready,
Otherwise, he's gonna be back here in June, looking for this again.
yeah.
Right, the last thing we need is having been here.
Yeah, I'd be pleased to carry on with the understanding that after my term as president is complete, if you at whatever point that you identify someone else who's willing to take on the responsibilities here, I'd be glad to work with that person, make sure it's a smooth transition at the council.
And when you and I spoke, you had said that as the past president, you have a non-voting role
Yeah,
at the table
Well,
for the
actually,
next year?
I get to, if I am a sitting member of the council in my first year as immediate past president, I also get to vote. So if I were your rep through May of 2020, then my next year, or my first year as past president, I would also be a voting member of the executive committee. So that's really inside baseball.
Mhm.
So, but
Okay. Board member comments, suggestions?
Just a question about whether we're voting on May 2019, or we're voting on some.
As I say,
term beyond that.
I would.
I'm happy to extend it.
Yeah, I would rather be appointing Keith to the full, for the full length of the term, especially given the conversation we just had where he indicated if we have somebody who emerges within the town that wants it and will do it for us, he'll be the perfect mentor for that person. So we can alter
So
the
would that be
motion,
through
yeah.
2020?
Yeah, well, it could be, if you're looking for the full term, it's a three-year term.
Yeah, be 22,
So,
right?
yeah, so you could say it would be January 25th of 2022. Because I have to say, right now, I don't have any commitments that have 2022 in them right now. Except, of course, the one will be 35 years. Margaret and I will be 35 years
there you
this
go.
year. And I'm sure that we'll be 38 years by 2022.
Okay, so we're all set then. We just need a motion. right?
Is it January 25th, 2022?
Yeah, it would be, it'd be January 20, in order for it to be a three-year
Right,
term.
right.
Okay.
It would simply be just.
It was only May because that was just giving him part of the year, so we need to
Yeah,
adjust
and
it.
you can take out the final clause about coinciding. If it's a straight three-year term.
Yeah, that's what we're looking at.
Yeah,
here.
then you could,
So we get two changes there, Anthony, you got that?
you could extend it to,
Yep. And then that
And
May
then it'll be
31st
January.
becomes, you're right, exactly.
Okay.
yeah, as a practical matter, will I be attending summer meetings? I might not be, since we're planning to spend time in Nantucket this summer.
Well, it's a good time to, help facilitate
Well,
that
I have
transition
been
too.
asked, though, at MAPC to help
Can we
host.
get you a
to
spot
host
on the
retreat.
steamship authority or something, Keith?
We host the MAPC summer retreat on Nantucket, so we'll see about that.
All right.
Okay, we ready?
Sure.
Move that the Board of Selectmen vote pursuant to Mass General Laws, Chapter 40B, Section 24, to extend Keith Bergman's term as the Town of Littleton's representative on the Metropolitan Area Planning Council from January 25th, 2019 to January 25th, 2022.
Second?
Okay, the motion's been made by Selectman Napoli, seconded by Selectman Gerbig. Any further discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Thank you, Keith.
Thank you.
Good to see you
Thanks
again.
very much. Good to see you. Thanks very much.
We're gonna see you the next weekend, are you gonna be?
Yes,
yeah,
I'll be
okay.
at MMA, and look forward to seeing you
Thanks,
there.
Keith.
Thanks so much.
All right, trying to recover the schedule somewhat. Our 7:30 item, joint meeting with the Historical Commission. Are you folks still out there with us? Historical Commission members? If you are, please don't be bashful, please come forward. Were they noticed? They must have been.
I didn't see anybody from the beginning.
Email was sent.
Huh?
Yep, they were notified.
They were notified, okay. does the board, we have no members from the Historical Commission here, huh? Oh, well, want to reschedule? That's an important topic, and we need to talk with him. The next time, I would suggest we put that on, I know the 28th is kind of full, but we've got to meet with these folks somehow, or we're going to deal with the issue of that building
Right.
independent of them. It is under the control of the selectmen, and that was a point that Chuck wanted me to point out, is that while town purchased it, with the urging of the Historical Commission, as any property, it's our responsibility, and it remains so as long as the town owns it.
Right.
I don't know if
Well,
there's,
I think the important actionable item in that, as long as the town owns it, I mean, I
Right.
think we've always kicked around the idea that the best outcome for this house may well be
put a restriction on it and sell
put a
it.
restriction on it and sell it.
Yep.
And I would like to more explicitly take that item up with the Historical
Right.
Commission, not just what is its maintenance, but truly
We got to have a plan.
address the-
We have to have
address
a
the
plan.
question.
Yeah.
And there's been time to put a plan in place,
Sure,
so.
sure.
or at
It was,
least have
last May is
discussions
when we
about a
bought
plan,
it,
right.
yeah. And we've had maintenance issues, Anthony's had been involved with that, Chris has been involved with that, Ed Mullen has helped out, I mean, but, and the town spent money on the property
It's not
already.
lost on me that Ed's commentary was, sell this thing.
Right, right.
Long before the town was looking at it, I, as a real estate agent, I went through what Ian said back then, the amount of work that goes in this.
I mean, and we knew that, we asked the Historical Commission or CPC, someone, to get
Yeah, we had hopeful
have-
prospects,
Yeah,
yeah.
some work done to.
But that kind of has fallen down on its knees, so I don't know, Anthony, if you can convey the message to whoever you need to, that we're disappointed they didn't join us. The message is that they need to get working on proposals for a plan with us, otherwise we have to discuss what to do with the property.
Right.
Okay.
Okay, and if it can't be the 28th, whatever the next available, I mean, there are
There's already
people,
a restriction on it, correct?
well,
Actually, we've talked about the
I don't think we
restriction, but
formally adopted it,
I don't
no.
know if I've seen that loop closed.
Yeah.
I'm looking at Chris. Do you know him? You don't know anything? Yeah.
He's the pot lawyer, I don't know. Are people calling you that now? They are, I thought they might be, yeah, all right.
All right.
You do other things, just to be clear, yes.
Yeah.
But, yeah, so we need to follow up on that, that's unfortunate. But, okay, we'll talk about that.
Yep.
All right. Segue appropriate, Chris, you're up next, adult use marijuana retail discussions. All right, when we last met, I think we were talking about, what our opportunities and obligations were under the state laws and the ever-changing CCC approach to things, and specifically, I think the dialogue we had when we had a couple members of the planning board here with us, and I guess they were aware of tonight's meeting, but I'm told, Anna, I saw here earlier, Anna is here, the other folks weren't able to join us, right, Ed and Mark, for whatever reason, but we were gonna look at different alternatives and try to give some thought to what kind of criteria we might want to put in place and what kind of process for getting to the point we have what is it, 2 licensees we're allowed to award
That's right.
retail.
Under the zoning bylaw that the town adopted in the 2018 annual town meeting, the zoning allows for up to 2 potential retail locations for adult use marijuana in town, but only those 2 and never any more than those 2. So there was some discussion a couple months back about the idea of, to the extent that there were only going to ever be 2 allowed in town, maybe it made sense to try to see what level of interest was out there, what people or entities or organizations might be interested in locating in town, and essentially pitting them against one another in an attempt to identify the best possible applicants.
Not unlike the process that was undertaken for the medical site.
For the medical site, and I think also somewhat similar to the process that was used to award the last remaining.
Liquor license, true, exactly, right.
That seemed to work very well when the board did that. So in terms of when I was trying to map out a process, I patterned it directly on that. Essentially, having the Board of Selectmen make an announcement to the world that it is interested in seeing who's out there, having everybody submit an application all at the same time, and then the board could hold them all up against one another and attempt to identify which would be the best applicants in the best locations and the most likely to succeed over the long term.
And just correct me if I'm wrong here, but what an important distinction is, unlike liquor law where the criteria is spelled out by the law and the state, we do have, as we understand it, some leeway in establishing criteria locally for awarding that process?
Yep.
Okay.
And you can apply, there's several levels of review that will get applied. If anyone ever wants to attempt to open up a retail establishment in town. The first would, if we didn't engage in the process that I just described, the first level of review would be the need to negotiate a host community agreement between the applicant and the board. The applicant needs to have that HCA in hand in order to proceed on to the next steps. In addition to the HCA, the applicant would need to go to the planning board for a special permit. So that there are any number of criteria that were adopted under the zoning bylaw at the last town meeting that the planning board would apply in deciding whether or not the applicant ought to be allowed to site at whatever location they've identified. In addition to that, the applicant needs a license from the state and from the Cannabis Control Commission. So I think, and what we're talking about doing now is adding on even an additional layer, which is an additional level of review before someone comes in and attempts to negotiate the HCA with you.
Okay.
So that's what we did. The last time we were together, we had sort of attempted to map out the process very generally, but didn't make any attempt when we were last talking to identify what an interested applicant ought to provide to you as part of an application, or we didn't make any real attempt to, at that time, to establish what criteria you would apply in making your decision and distinguishing between various applicants. What I've done for your packet this evening is just a preliminary attempt to sketch out those required application materials and some non-comprehensive decision-making criteria that you'd apply when conducting the review. And those are not, those two lists in the draft are certainly not intended to be comprehensive or exhaustive, but are just, the starting point of the discussion. We can add to that, we can subtract from that as the board
Let me
sees
just
fit.
make sure, Anna, do you have copies of that, or?
I don't have copies of that.
Okay, we'd love to, we should share any of that kind of stuff with the planning board members too, even though I guess the permit process exclusively is on the selectmen, but the planning board's role in it would be what? Just building, depending
Well,
on.
planning would permit it, but first they have to have an HCA.
That's right, the other way
from us.
around, okay, yeah, HCA from us and then the permits through the planning board. Thank you for.
So planning
correcting
could
me.
effectively tell them to pound sand
Right.
after we've gone through.
We try to be pretty careful to have.
Thank you.
The way I normally think about it is the Board of Selectmen is the sort of preliminary gatekeeper. And then, but nothing you do in entering into an HCA requires the planning board to do anything either. They apply their own independent review.
Okay.
If you don't mind me
No, dive
jumping
in,
in
yep.
and expressing some thoughts here with what Chris put together. Chris, I think what you put together pretty closely reflects what we've talked about. My concern is that once it's all laid out, it becomes clear to me that putting all of these together as a list really favors the biggest, most sophisticated marijuana retailers, right? The ones who can address all of these things because they're either well-capitalized enough or they're big enough to absorb some of these costs. And one of the things that we actually said was, we may want to incentivize the exact opposite
Right.
kind of establishment. So by putting some of these in place, I'm concerned if we may not be working against what we suggested we wanted.
Well, we
Even
can,
though
we
this
can
hews
materially
closely to what you
change
said.
the criteria list. I mean, and as you say, put in writing things like, what are your existing ties to the community? What's your, program for interacting with the community, all
I
that
think-
kind of stuff.
I think that's something I want to see. I would also advocate that we should pull out of this some of the things that are the bigger cost components of the plan. In other words, if someone can give us a traffic analysis that says through modifying our hours in this way, we expect a minimal traffic impact because we're only gonna be this big and we're only gonna be open from 11 a.m. to 3 p.m. Great. That's different than we intend to serve 800 people a day. Okay, now I want to see a traffic analysis with a stamp on it, you know? So I don't know what the right way to reflect that is, but I'd like to see some
I think we
flexibility
need to
in it.
play around with the criteria list, but both adding topics that aren't covered here, and again, red flagging some of the ones that you just mentioned. I mean, that's why I don't mind starting with this as a starting point, but that's exactly.
I think it's exactly what we talked about.
Right.
Right.
Anna, jump in, consider yourself part of this discussion.
If I may, Mr. Chair, Chase, can you specify or give me an example of which one you think would be a hindrance to a small entity?
I was particularly picking on the traffic impact analysis prepared by a licensed or certified traffic engineering firm or consultant that addresses, among other things, accessibility from highways and major thoroughfares, and which includes a plan for mitigating traffic impacts. I very much want to see that. I think the planning board has more than enough authority to require that as part of the special permit if the planning board so desires it. I'm not sure it should be a component of our host community agreement in that rigorous format. What I do want to see is a plan for mitigating traffic impacts. I want to know what they expect that to be, but I think it could be done depending on who it is, could be done in a narrative. Or if they want to dot the i's and cross the t's, by all means, they shouldn't be discouraged from providing something of that level of depth and complexity. But in my opinion, it's not, I don't want to be the gatekeeper based on not having $20,000 around to do traffic counts and the like.
And I wrestled with that a little bit as I was putting together the list, because I think all of the things on there are things that you might want to see when you're doing your review, but could also be a lot to ask of an applicant who's maybe one of 20 and doesn't have any reason to believe that they're going to be a successful applicant. Preparing a full-blown site plan and a traffic impact study is I think you make a good point.
Yeah, and I would, again, just put some meat on the bones of what's missing here that I think could be positive, attractants in the criteria is describe your existing relationship with the community, either in a business sense or otherwise, or your plans for engaging the community, and then two more from a business siting project. Describe your plans for integrating your facility with the existing neighborhood that you're in, without. Without upsetting the architectural or the retail norm, whatever, something about integration with the, wherever they're moving into, integrating with the local neighborhood, business neighborhood in a.
The character of the
Yeah, character of the
community,
community, that's the standard phrase, yeah. On the one hand, that on both a functional and an appearance integration with the community, and then two is also, here's a place where local applicants have a chance to shine and say, what are your ties to the community, and if you don't have them, what are your plans for engaging the community?
Right.
Now,
Give some weight to that.
by saying, what are your plans for engaging the community? I know the CCC, right now, their stance is, an HCA is an HCA, we don't read them, we just make sure that there's a signature.
That was their position until last Thursday.
Oh, until last Thursday.
What happened last
okay,
Thursday?
It's still their position. They still don't look at them, and they don't.
But they petitioned the legislature to
As of
remedy
last
that.
Thursday, they voted to petition the legislature to clarify what it is they can and can't do with respect to.
But we're talking about this language not specific just to HCA, but also as potential criteria in the permitting process. At least that's how I anticipate it, right? So unless they tell us otherwise, I'm hoping we can put criteria into the permitting end of it, so the planning board can use those measures when they're, not just, us in a
Oh,
negotiating
absolutely.
point.
Where I was taking this is that we have to be careful not to imply to applicants, because my guess is what's gonna happen is the legislature will say, we always intended you to read the damn things.
Right.
In which case, they will read them, and then they will find out that the vast majority of them are 3% plus a bunch of other goodies. And I don't know, I want to be careful that us saying, what else are you going to do for the community is not construed as
I think the better approach is to
something that's a problem.
use this process to make sure that we have an applicant that we like in a location that we think will work, will work well, and not use the, 6 months ago, I might have suggested that this could be an opportunity to extract more from an applicant, but I think
you would have been in good company.
given the level of review that the CCC is looking to apply, I don't think that's the right way to go right now.
Well, what can we ask for right now in AC? Is it actually spelled out, limitations?
The statute specifically, well, it sets limits on what we can get in an HCA in terms of money, and that what we can get in terms of funds from an applicant, it's up to 3% of gross revenue. But the money, there's language in the statute that says the money has to be spent or tied somehow to municipal expenses related to the site itself. So police details.
Does he use the word for the site itself?
I don't know. Got it here somewhere.
I was planning to use that for like
It's
public safety.
It is. It's got to be tied. It's got to be an impact related to the site itself.
Well, can you add to your list of things to look at there, whether it could be used for educational programs in the school and whatnot?
That I believe is exciting. So
okay,
yeah, that we can do.
Anna, you want to jump in? Yeah.
So I would agree, any education-based related information should be a significant part of the application in terms of what they intend to do within the town. A couple of other items that...
But it's only because it's on a similar vein, and I'll lose this thought in a moment, but also connection, not only education, but perhaps engagement with the local agricultural community too. If either, whether it's seeds, whether it's, any kind of sharing of knowledge base, growing, whatever. I mean, joining the local farm communities. I mean, these people intend to just come in, sell, bring their profit back to wherever they're going, or are they going to be, homegrown, organic businesses,
Based on, as I understand it from Jason, from Sanctuary Medicinals, is that the law currently doesn't allow those under 21 to be doing that, so perhaps that could be checked into a little bit more, but from what I understand, his ability to be able to have students on site, they have to be 21 years old, so I don't know how that would affect them from an agricultural perspective.
Yeah, I'm thinking out loud. I'm just trying to, I'm less hung up on the money. I assume that the big money questions, that they're gonna use the power they have to limit what we get. And the other day, it's gonna be everybody's gonna get their 3% and that's it. I'm more interested in using this process to encourage locals to do it, and that our two that get it are gonna be people that are invested in the community, both because they live here, or, we can't make that a requirement, but have that kind of, attachment so that they what we end up with are businesses that, we can be proud of and we know the owners of and we see them around town and whatever. That's
So looking at the list of people who have already expressed interest.
Yep. A couple of them are locals.
A couple of them are locals, so do we even need to go through this process, or do we take a look at the people that have already come forward on this list?
I don't think we have it. No one has come forward in a formal way, right? These were all.
No, but they've expressed interest.
Two of them are sitting here that expressed interest would be the better way to express.
Well, that's what I
And things turn over time. I think it would be well served to have a process in place.
Right.
I don't mind showing my cards in advance, I wouldn't be biased in what I would be looking for
Right.
personally. But telegraphing that up front by saying, here's the criteria we'll be looking to. If you can satisfy that, great.
Right.
Now, to your point, Paul, we had talked about including in this a community engagement plan. I think what we could do is incorporate that into this list of requirements and then spell out what
We can leave it loose and
we're looking
let
for.
them tell us what they would do, rather, let that.
How
that might
long do
be-
we anticipate this process to take, I guess, is
Well,
my
that's a,
question.
who knows? I mean,
Yeah.
let's put a cap on it if you want.
Right.
The one thing you said, Paul, too, is that, it'd be nice to have locals, but the one thing that we have to take into account is seeing the whole package.
Sure.
I mean-
They have to be viable.
Yeah.
Right.
I just don't want to set it out there that we're only going to be, first thing is going to be, we might have a candidate that's going to meet all the requirements, that's not a resident, right?
Yep.
Right.
And that's where, I think the finances have got to be tight, right? We've got to believe that we're entering into an HCA with an organization
Right.
that can actually make a go of
Right,
this.
yeah. I mean, I guess it's worth it to go back to the original list that Chris supplied us with. A lot of that stuff is necessary and of value. I'm just trying to play around the fringes of what else should be at play here
Right.
that tilts the scales towards, if some locals have managed to get their financing in place and they have a good location and they have, proper credentialing,
Right.
I'd like to find a way to award it to those folks.
Right.
As far as citing is concerned, we use the words in here, all responses must include a, quote, specific site within town. For the sake of providing clarity to the applicants, well, what do we think that means? I mean, certainly if we're looking at applicants, that can't mean a signed lease. Does that mean?
Which number are you looking at, Chase?
At the,
A letter?
at the bottom of page 1. It actually comes before that.
Oh,
Yeah.
Right, a letter of intent, I mean, we certainly want to know that they have the ability to lease space there.
Right. Yeah, I think it's something short of a lease, like evidence that they've done their homework and have the ability to lease that property if given the green light.
Right, because we can't get into the business of issuing a license and then they shop around for a place to put it. That's not going to work
Right,
that way.
that's the opposite of what we're looking for
Right.
as well. Right, so a
Then-
letter of intent to.
Then the place they were looking at gets rented out to somebody else ahead of time, so.
Right. Yeah, I mean, it'd have to all be contingent on site-specific, yeah. Yes. Oh, yeah, folks want to,
I have a question, Paul Mason, 32 Lawrence Street.
sure.
Pertaining to your last question about having intent, is there going to be reluctance for real estate to give some kind of letter of intent if they don't have good direction from the BOS in terms of what the expectation is?
Good question, hard to know. Realtor on the board, yeah, what do you?
That's a good question. If I was owning property, I'd want to know exactly what was, how long is it going to take? Do I have a chance of losing that property to somebody else? And if I owned a property, I'd be concerned the amount of time it would be sit empty.
I was
So-
thinking
Are you talking about
it's going to be hard for somebody who's interested in getting property to get some kind of commitment or something from a real estate owner if they don't have a clear idea of how likely it is that this potential occupant is going to be able to get a permit.
I would think that too, and I think that may well be legitimate, but just looking at the list of 7 entities that have shown interest already, 5 of them already have an identified property that they, I don't know what level of security they've got involved with it, but at least the people that have expressed interest to us so far are tackling that before they get to see us. But, it's certainly something that has to be monitored. Sir?
For the
Yeah,
recommendations, Sankar Gautam, I'm a clinical chemist.
Okay.
I might be on the list there. Your bylaws identify independent testing laboratory as a canvas facility as well. My inquiry is, since he mentioned about licenses are going to be capped at 2, is an independent testing laboratory going to be capped at the same level, and are
Want to
the...
address that, Chris?
When we're talking about what's capped at 2, we're speaking only about retail establishments. All of the, I go back and double check the bylaw, but I believe all of the other kinds of establishments, including testing laboratories, cultivation, and processing, are allowed in the industrial district by special permit without any limit on the number that can go there.
That's correct. We went out of our way not to cap those components of the industry.
Buffers applicable to those facilities that are on the bylaws, the
You would,
500?
yes, you would need a permit from the planning board, but you wouldn't, and you would need to negotiate an agreement with the selectmen before you went for that permit from the planning board, but you're not in a race to get 1 of 2 or 3 permits. There's no limit, so there's no hurry in that regard.
Okay. So I have identified a location and I kind of wanted to move forward. I was actually recommended by Diane Peterson to be here tonight and introduce myself and present my interest. There are currently 4 laboratories in the state, 2 fully licensed, 2 have provisional license. Every day I delay is critical for me, so I need at least a way to apply for a construction permit so that I can build out a space, so that I can prepare my lab for full application, for a host community agreement and a cannabis commission application. So where is my starting point and how do I go about starting this procedure? I am not going to be selling, I am not going to be growing, it's going to be independent testing laboratory that will only be testing, and it's not going to smell like cannabis. I have been in the testing business for about 12 years, and I have tested all Schedule 4 drugs for drugs of abuse testing.
Well, let's have legal counsel speak to that. Thank you.
The use that you've described needs a special permit from the planning board and the agreement with the selectmen. So you can, I'd suggest that if you're interested in pursuing that, you ought to, I think, send a formal letter to the Board of Selectmen.
And planning board.
Asking, describing what you want to do, where you want to do it, and asking for some negotiation with the town. And the board will then respond to that letter in due course. But I think you've got to, from what you've just described, there are a couple permitting and contract hurdles that you need to get through before you would be able to go into the building commissioner's office and get a construction permit. You've got to do all that stuff before he would let you build anything.
Notwithstanding the fact that we don't yet have a letter from you, I guess I would like the board to authorize town council, presuming we get one between now and our next meeting, I would like to authorize town council to work with the applicants to sort out any legal issues associated with it.
Yep. But point of contact ought to be through the administrator's office, and Anthony could forward him along.
When it says
One last
applicant,
query.
and it
Sure.
says list how to be
3%
notified.
host community
So they didn't
agreement,
apply, they just
is that only for retail or that's applicable all over the board?
Well, we have host community agreements with the medicinal outfit. We're discussing them now for the retail, and I don't think we've ever even talked about it with a test lab facility, host community agreement.
Sales are easy to sort of tie the percentage payment to. It's a little bit it can be a little bit trickier with either agricultural uses or testing uses.
Can you look into what the precedent is there? Somebody must be doing it.
But I think that the short answer is there is likely to be, there could very well be a payment required to the town as part of
Rest assured, if we can charge you something, we will.
as part of your host community agreement. That would be, I think, an expectation of the board.
Okay.
So I have to go to the planning board next.
Well, also you should get a letter in, as Attorney Heap suggested, to the town administrator's office so that we can, authorize council to talk with you on some of these issues. But it's something that that wasn't even on our radar screen, to be perfectly, I don't think anyone else had thought of that
No,
yet.
I mean, given the hour, I wouldn't mind getting back to the intended
Yes, right,
agenda.
okay. But, so you got a point to follow up on. We'll get back to what we were talking about. Anna?
So as a final point, I would like to make the Board of Selectmen aware, as the planning board is aware, that our current grow facility, Sanctuary Medicinals, has received numerous complaints from neighbors about there being the smell of burning marijuana. Not the sweet cannabis smell, but the smell of burning marijuana, and that it's happening throughout the course of the day. It's even happening in the morning hours and the afternoon hours when school children are waiting for their bus and they're smelling it. Information is forthcoming in writing in terms of the neighbors who are making these claims. But as I hear potential applicants talk about how there will be no smell, well, as I recall, Sanctuary Medicinal said that there would be
Yeah,
no smell.
and I don't remember the specific component of the burning part, but Anthony's well aware, we have had a couple of complaints that we've been working with Sanctuary on.
These are newer, I mean,
These are
the most
recent?
recent one that I'm aware of was 6 weeks ago.
I'm
Right.
getting them almost every couple of days.
Who are you
Okay,
getting-
we aren't.
Who are you getting them from? Because I'm not.
Well, I'll talk to you about that. So the
Okay.
big thing, though, is to be able to make sure that you all are aware of it.
Oh, yeah.
It is ongoing. I have smelled it myself. Other planning board members have smelled it as well. And the big thing is trying to figure out what to do about it.
Yeah, well, we did have complaints in the fall, and Anthony and the police chief, and I think who else went out, Board of Health, or did Jim Gareffi go
Gareffi
out?
went
Jim
out.
Gareffi went out.
Right. Because here's the thing, in terms of this being a whole new field for our town, for the state, having come from a state where it is pretty open and very smelly throughout this, throughout Denver, throughout Colorado, I don't think that that's what Littleton intended, so I want to make sure that we're nipping it in the bud, so to speak, no pun intended.
Right.
But from the standpoint of people who even live in that neighborhood, voted for it.
Yeah.
They said yes.
Yeah.
But what they didn't vote for was the smell. because
Okay,
we were told
I
no.
think all the more important reason to make sure that those complaints come in, since we're a license holder, that we
Well,
can,
It's my understanding that, quote, enforcement can only be done through the building commissioner, so.
well,
I
again, the building commissioner works under the
So
administrator's office.
referred people to the building commissioner in terms of trying to figure out what to do.
Okay.
But that's all that's being asked is.
Yeah, all right.
everything
Well-
that should be done.
Well, it should come through the administrator's office, so
Right.
we become aware of it.
Right.
Then we can follow up with the planning board and the building commissioner. If it goes right to the building commissioner, it's not getting on our
The
radar.
last instance we were aware of, I think, was the
Right.
one 6 weeks or so ago that.
Right, yeah, so we.
And it
this
wasn't
is
a
the first we're
burning type
hearing
of thing, it
it.
was just a
That's-
cannabis smell.
Right.
So we're not getting all the information on that, but hopefully we can close the loop on that.
Well, I'd be happy to work with Anthony to make sure that he's getting the information, and if you think anybody else needs it, I'd be happy to.
Well, again, we had engaged Jim Gareffi in the Show Board of Health agent, too. Okay.
Can I just?
Thank you. Board?
Oh, sure. Can I make one comment about the draft? The second page, the third paragraph from the bottom, under criteria, demonstrated direct experience in the cannabis industry or similar industry. What would be a similar industry?
Right. Agriculture? No, honestly, really, I would.
I mean, I would think, particularly for the retail license, anything
Yeah.
retail associated,
That's what I-
agricultural.
yeah.
Or agricultural. yeah.
Right, but, or if you have a retail experience.
Yeah.
Yeah, so like retail,
But there's also an
not
element,
necessarily yeah, go ahead.
there's also an element of the retail shops that's really geared towards
Yeah,
almost.
Spencer's Gifts, that sort of thing.
Pseudo, well, I was gonna say pseudo medicinal uses,
right.
you know, and
Right.
so I would suggest their expertise in even things like,
I just think, do we need to define similar industry a little more detailed?
Well,
or
the
leave it open?
specific piece I would add is, agricultural applies, that's a legitimate one, and, it's, I don't think that's dispositive, but it's a way of asking them, what do you bring to the table? And maybe they don't.
I would
Maybe they
suggest addition by subtraction there, rather than saying similar industry.
Yeah.
Demonstration of relevant experience.
don't. No, okay.
You define it, you tell us what
Right.
in your background is relevant.
Yeah, I like that better.
Okay.
Excellent.
Do you think we've made enough progress on this issue here tonight? I know Chuck definitely wants to be a part of the conversation, and there are other members, Anna, of your board, too, that I will want input to this, and Chris, you probably got enough to work on for
I think I've got
for another
enough.
iteration. Yeah, and you'll be looking into the lab facility question, too? And we'll be following up on those complaints to make sure we got a process so that whoever's complaining to who, we all get to the same place. Legitimate issue. We know what the pitch was, and if it's not bearing out, then we got to do something about it.
We also have some folks on our list here.
Yes.
I would be interested.
Oh, all right. Anyone else want to speak on this topic? The adult use marijuana retail discussion. Bronson.
Brownson, Harvard Road. The draft is part of your packet and is
Yes,
available online.
that's right.
Thank you.
Terrific, thanks. All right, if not, then we'll, or with that, then we'll move on to interim town administrator. Anthony, a couple of topics there, space needs and Long Lake Bathhouse.
Yeah, thanks, Chris.
Thank you. Thank you all.
Chris. Yep.
Thanks, Chris.
So, quickly, with regards to the OPM services, the OPM, the contract has been signed. We met with him and instructed him to proceed to the next process, which is getting an RFQ out for architectural services.
One thing Chuck had asked to make sure, and he figured that was where the update was going, is to make sure that the scope is broad enough to include not just a review of this campus, but also other facilities like
Yeah.
DCU or whatever else has been in consideration.
Yes.
Yeah, okay, great. Do we need to do any action on that, or that's just an update?
No, that's just an
Okay.
What's the
update.
timeline on
Good question.
actually preparing that and getting?
Are we, when's the next meeting? Do we have something?
Our
coming up
next
on that?
meeting?
No, on,
It's January 20.
yeah, I'll look through my email.
All right,
Something
it's-
came up.
it's-
Marge knows.
Well, I don't know.
No, this is the 29th, is for architects to be able to come in and get briefed by the OPM and representatives from town on what we may be looking for them to do, just so they have a little bit more of an opportunity to ask questions, that's all. I think that was January 29th, Cindy, that's popping into my head.
Okay. I
It's
gotta get
30
my calendar
days,
straightened
and
out.
to answer your question, Chase, it's 30 days from, so we're talking beginning of February.
Okay.
Okay.
The second issue, with regard to the Long Lake Bathhouse, their septic, I found out that Park and Rec had requested to go on the school committee's agenda to ask if they could connect to Shaker Lane, or at least explore that. I asked the schools and Park and Rec if we could kind of almost take it into the sewer project a little bit, just for the sake of
Using the services,
using the services of Weston and Sampson to do two things. Number one, to see if that's possible. And number two, I think it would be a good opportunity to look at the treatment plant at Shaker Lane, to see what the condition that is. So, and for a relatively short cost that we can absorb in our project, I think it would be a good plan to do that. So we're doing that.
Feasibility, is that what?
Yeah, basically feasibility and an update of our current system at.
To be clear, feasibility not of connecting those to the smart sewer, but
Nothing to
the
do with the
feasibility of connecting
To
a
Shaker
Long
Lane.
Lake bathhouse to
Bathhouse to
Shaker
Shaker
Lane.
Lane, right.
Right.
And it's just using the services of the same engineers we have on board with the sewer.
Good.
Yes,
Good.
right. Yeah.
Right, so-
Smart to point that out.
Yeah, so it's real preliminary. We're sending a lot of information back and forth on that, but more to come on that.
Okay, great.
That'd be good seasonal if it worked out, because kids would be out of school and.
Good point, yeah. Okay, we do have two sets of minutes, and I don't know, is it Diane that's been doing, like, whoever's been doing them has been listening and making the appropriate changes. I think these are wonderful, excellent.
That's it all.
Okay, so members, did you have a chance to look at them?
Yes.
How many comments?
Okay, nor do I. We have motion then, Madam Clerk, you.
Motion that the Board of Selectmen vote to approve the meeting minutes of December 3rd and December 17th, 2018.
Second?
Okay, the motion's been made by Selectman Napoli, seconded by Selectman Gerbig. Any further discussion? All those in favor, say aye. Aye. All opposed? You guys have it. Okay, again, the last topic, the board is in session. It's a public meeting, but we're going to be asking that the cable be disconnected, because we're going to discuss the questions we want to ask our town administrator applicants tomorrow night, and don't want to give them undue notice. So, Joe, please, and the board, okay with that, right? Okay.
Yep.